Omani Convention and Exhibition Centre is the host venue for this World Race Walking Team Championships, World Athletics Race Walking Team Championships, the 29th edition of these championships. First time a World Athletics event has been staged in the Sultanate of Oman. And Muscat is the capital city, sitting on the southeast coast of the Arabian Peninsula. Racing on the first day. Well, Oman is renowned for its pristine coastline and stunning deserts, ancient forts as well, while Muscat itself, the capital, has been an important trading port for 2,000 years. And is famed for its markets, museums and mosques. It's where old meets new, but the beauty of this nation is undoubted. 900 kilometers from north to south, a nation of some 5 million souls. It is very much a visit destination of growing stature. Well, these race walking team championships on the second day, the 35-kilometer races today and a 20k as well. There were 3 races yesterday on the first day. And we can take a look at the timetable now through today. Simultaneously, the men's 35 kilometres and women's 35-kilometre races will take place, starting at 7 o'clock local time in just a few minutes, and then at 4 o'clock this afternoon, the men's 20 kilometres race walk will take place on the 2-kilometre circuit. And the weather, Mara Yamauchi, considerably warmer today than yesterday, a little bit warmer than yesterday.
Certainly is. 21 degrees yesterday at this time, so much hotter today and going up to a high of 29 to 30 degrees.
Well, the athletes have been training on the 2-kilometre circuit. It's 1 kilometre long. Of course, they negotiate a corner at each end, and it's an anti-clockwise circuit, a long curve on a very good quality road surface, but unusually, indeed uniquely in the history of this event, it is over quite a large slope. The athletes drop some 25 metres from the top end of the course down to the lowest point, and that does involve some extra challenges for the athletes. Well, that's where the championships is taking place in Oman, and Muscat up against the coast does mean there's a slight breeze coming off the ocean, which is very welcome for the athletes as they walk northwards from the start line past that refreshment station. And then there's a considerable drop. You can't see it in this map, of course, but there's quite a considerable drop, as you can see at the bottom of your screen, down towards the very lowest point where they turn around and make the long journey back up with the convention centre in front of them. The 35-kilometre races will start there today. The 20k starts where the other races yesterday all started, the common start and finish line. Water stations, of course, absolutely essential for the athletes. Slight gradient there as they get to the top end of the course. They go down again and through that finish line. 35 kilometres, 17.5 laps. Well, the breeze on this second day doesn't look quite as strong as on the first. And the women's 35-kilometre race, there are some... It's a big race, Mara. Plenty of starters going in this one. Some 34 starters from 14 countries. But the Chinese totally dominant yesterday with taking all 3 individual gold medals, all 3 team gold medals. And we might get a similar story today.
Yes, very strong Chinese team in the women's lineup, but 1 or 2 others who might give them a run for their money, particularly Ecuador's Glenda Morejon. Also very strong Spanish team today.
Nervous moments these for the athletes. The early morning start time does help them a little bit. The Americans, Casey and Taylor Talcott, will be having their own battle, not expected to feature amongst the medalists. Garcia Carro certainly is amongst the favourites for this one. And the men, well, they start over on the left-hand side compared with the ladies. And Albaimani, Zakaria Albaimani, the youngest in the Omani team, learning their trade. The Omanis, they're not expected to feature amongst the medals. There is He Jingzhong of China, first in the Chinese trial with an Asian best back in January. The Omanis, of course, having athletes in every event through these 2 days, but they are relative novices. The Chinese, well, anybody, they are so strong, such strength in depth, that they are expected to feature amongst the battle for medals. There's Evan Dunphy of Canada, Olympic bronze medalist over 50 kilometers last year in Sapporo. Dunphy, very experienced, also took the bronze medal at the World Championships over 50 kilometers in Doha back in 2019. There is Miguel Angel Lopez of Spain, the European champion back in 2014 at 20k, the world champion in 2015 at 20k. Lopez expected to be perhaps the main challenger for the Chinese athletes. This 35k distance, brand new. This is the first global race of 35 kilometers of any significance. 65 entries in the men's race, almost double the women's entry, with 29 nations represented.
Before the start of the 35-kilometer race for men and women.
The athletes gathering there, knowing that a very, very tough race is ahead of them. 35 kilometers, so it's about 21.8 miles if you want it in another currency. But of course, the vast majority of these athletes think in kilometers. They will get their splits in kilometers. And the women's event. Well, Mara, who's your money on in particular in this women's race?
Well, Enrique is there of Portugal. She is the 9th all-time over 50k. She was the 2017 London World Championships champion over 50k. And very strong Spanish team as well. Of course, this is a new event as a championship event. It has been competed over in the past, but as a championship event, this is the very first time. And Glenda Morejon has a couple of stunning debuts to her name.
Yes, the Ecuadorian making her debut here, holds the world under 20-kilometer best. There is Wu Quanming of China, won the Chinese 35-kilometer trials on the 22nd of January. By Mani, who we saw a little earlier, all smiles, but he must be very nervous. The Omani, just a youngster in that Omani team. Evan Dunphy, well, very, very experienced Dunphy. His exploits in those Canadian colours involved 2 major bronze medals in recent years, including in Sapporo at those Olympic Games last year. And He here, the Chinese champion from January, powerfully built. And Angel Lopez of Spain. The Spanish, of course, will be well acclimatized and walking a huge discipline on the Iberian Peninsula, highly respected. They are very, very tough characters. Many of these athletes are formerly 50-kilometer walkers, and many of them are 20-kilometer walkers who are moving up in distance.
And we are underway.
Away they go then. More of these athletes haven't got a 35-kilometer personal best than have got a 35-kilometer personal best. That is how new this discipline is. And in fact, Mara, we were talking earlier, no world records are going to be recognised in this discipline until the 1st of January next year, because I think World Athletics want the event to sort of bed in and there to be some data to work from.
That's right, yes, it's a brand new event as a championship event, and as you say, from the 1st of January next year, world records will be ratified. qualified. There are also time limits set by World Athletics, 2:22 for men and 2:38 for women. So times under those limits will be recognised as world records. So any time set this year will be recognised as world leads. And as you said, it's replaced the discontinued 50k. Last year in Sapporo we saw the final Olympic 50k. So very much the beginning of a new era in race walking with this new distance. But what's going to be really fascinating is seeing who does well in it. Is it going to be the 20k athletes who really have incredible speed, or is it going to be the more endurance athletes who've specialised over 50k? And I must say the men's field, particularly today, is absolutely packed with talent, including some 50k specialists and some athletes stepping up from 20k. So Sweden's Percy Carlstrom, for example, the bronze medalist over 20k in Doha in 2019 at the World Championships, he's stepping up. So it's going to be really interesting to see who does well. And of course the women, they haven't had many opportunities to race 50k. It's never been an Olympic event for them. It was held at the Doha World Championships in 2019 and in 2017 in London. But now they know they're going to have 35k going forward. So I think the hope is that that will really encourage more women into the longer event. And it will be held in Oregon later this year at the World Championships.
Well, quite a few athletes from the walking community resisted the push to adjust their event from 50 kilometers to 35 kilometers as the longest of the walking distances, but it was driven, I think, by the IOC, who wanted to reduce the longest event in the athletics portfolio, so to speak, and the compromise was to arrive at the 35-kilometer distance. Clearly the middle ground, the meeting ground for the 20-kilometer and 50-kilometer walkers, even though there is still a 20-kilometer walk in the program. But no surprise, Mara, that the Chinese are moving very much to the fore. Hey, they're right in the middle of this men's front line, so to speak. And just looking at He Jinghong, he's only 23. His best of 2:31 puts him 7th on the world all-time list. Two tall characters either side of him. The Spanish athletes expected to be very, very strong here. In fact, they are the two fastest in the world. Lopez, Miguel Angel Lopez and Alvaro Martin. And it's no surprise that they have gone to the front and clearly plan to make this hard and fast and honest in effect from the get-go.
Yes, we've had a big Spanish squad here for these championships, and this perhaps is the strongest for Spain. Really impressive men's 35k team. Mark Tour also 4th.
Well, Hay won the Chinese World Race Walk Team Championships trials, and he set an Asian best, did Hay, in that with 2:31.05. So he knows that he's capable of matching the Spanish who bracketed him just now. He moves across there to be in front of his teammate Lu Ning, who was 4th in that Chinese trial for this championship from which to select the team. Not many nations had an actual specific trial, but the Chinese managed to. And wearing is that 359 there? Just trying to see the number of Doctor.
And in the blue vest there, that's Andres Chocho of Ecuador. He's actually the coach of Glenda Morejon, who's going in the women's race. I was mentioning Mark Tour earlier, the Spaniard. He was 4th last year in Sapporo, overtaken in the final stages of the 50k by Canada's Evan Dunphy. So it's all China and Spain at the moment.
Well, that is 1 kilometer covered. They've just gone through the common start-finish line for the races yesterday, and it will be the start and finish line for the 20k this afternoon. And that first kilometer, 4:57 with Angel Lopez of Spain to the fore, but a big pack, of course, in the early stages. It will start breaking up pretty quickly. That was the case with all the races yesterday. But 4:57, Mara.
That's a very pedestrian start for the men. We've seen the Spanish athletes earlier this year walking 2 hours 27, 2 hours 29. That 4:57 is well outside that, but I expect we'll see them speeding up as the race progresses. Of course, very difficult conditions, very, very hot. Already 24 degrees Celsius expected to rise up to 29. And that incline, as you said earlier, 25 meters or so drop between the turn points, which is the biggest incline that's ever been used in a championship event, with the steepest section about a 3% gradient. So that the combination of those two factors we've seen in yesterday leading to some changes in the finishing order in the final stages as the athletes really tire.
Well, you can see Jelinek of Poland over to the extreme left there in the white vest, pouring water all over himself, the 36-year-old, already feeling it. He was 7th in the 2010 European Championships. It was in Barcelona, funnily enough. But Jakub Jelinek, making sure very early on he gets plenty of liquids on board and trying to keep cool. He was 12th in the 50k last year in Sapporo, a few hundred kilometers to the north of Tokyo. Well, we can get a look at the women as well, who are, of course, started with these men. Some few minutes ago, and Priyanka of India is the current leader. Priyanka Goswami, the 25-year-old, moving very well. You don't want to see too much vertical movement of the head, but Priyanka, they're bouncing around quite a bit. Of course, a vertical movement is wasted energy, and Priyanka Goswami, the Indian record holder at 20k, doesn't have a personal best for 35k. This is a new territory for her, new ground, covering this sort of distance, but very, very quick leg turnover there. Quite a pitter-patter stride, not a long stride.
Yeah, quite short stride there. Of course, she'll be encouraged yesterday by the team bronze medal won by India in the women's 20k, the first medal ever won at these championships by India. And of course, we saw Amit Khatri nearly winning the men's under 20 10k, but being disqualified in the very final stages. So India really a new force in race walking.
She's a good athlete, finished 17th in the Olympic Games last year. Won the Indian 20k title last year, of course. She's a former gymnast, is Priyanka Goswami. There's that men's pack, very big pack, of course, at the front end, probably what, about 30 strong, that main group, before it begins to thin out a little bit.
It's interesting, actually, the men's beginning at such a pedestrian pace means Priyanka, they're right in amongst the leading men's group. We would normally see them much more strung out, but I'm sure that will happen soon enough. And a couple of the Japanese men there in the red vests with the grey hats. Of course, their teammate Suzuki won the 50k in Doha in 2019. They had a clean sweep of the medals in the 50k at the last edition of these championships in Taicang. And the silver medalist from that day, Katsuki Hayato, is in this team.
This camera angle gives you a really good idea of the speed they're moving at. This drone camera peering down like a vulture from above shows very clearly how quickly they move along the road surface. It's much faster than most people would go at when they're out jogging or even, dare I say, running. So that first kilometre, 4:57, as Mara pointed out quite rightly, on the slow side. It'll be interesting to see what they go through 2 kilometres in. They'll be approaching that mark now, and in fact they have just gone through 9:31 for 2 kilometres. So that second kilometre considerably quicker, and the acceleration has been put in there by, I think it was one of the Chinese, I think it might have been Hay. Here is the main pack for the ladies, the 2 American men, or 2 of the American men there. Neneval and Healy just ahead of the main pack of the women's 35k field, and to the left of picture, Lee of China pushing on strongly. Lee Maokuo, second in the World Championships back in 2019 in Doha, over 50k, and it was sweltering hot in Doha, of course, Mara, and that a real confidence boost. If you know you can perform well in those temperatures, then you'll feel a little bit more confident coming to a race like today.
Yes, I mean, the races were started at midnight in Doha because it was so hot. I think the temperature was slightly hotter than it is here, but you know, that was in the dark. Here they have bright sunshine to cope with as well, and as they go uphill on this course, they will have the sun in their faces. I'm told by Tim Barrett, multiple Olympian over 50k, that the incline up to the stadium at the Barcelona 92 Olympics was somewhat steeper than this incline, but apart from that, this is very unusual in terms of the gradient. You can really see there, I think that's the steepest section.
Oh yeah, I've raced up that hill in Barcelona up to the Montjuic stadium, the mountain there. It is very, very steep. It's a proper steep hill. This is a gradual gradient, but nonetheless, when you think they've got to negotiate it 17.5 times in this discipline, it really will take its toll. It makes it a far more dynamic challenge.
And that is Ziblo Katacyna of Poland. Forgive me if I've mispronounced her name. A personal best of 2:50.54 from last year. 25 years old. She's the 3-time Polish champion at 20k.
I may count about 12 in this women's pack that's broken away with only 12 minutes on the clock. It's broken down to an elite group, much quicker than the men's field. But yes, Ziblo of Poland moving really well here. Strange expression on her face, almost looks like a half smile, a sort of Mona Lisa type smile on her features there. Lee to the left there in the dark glasses. Was second in the Chinese World Race Walk Team Championship trials over 35k. That was in Nanjing, actually, back on the 22nd of January when the men and women had those trials.
And Lee is the silver medalist from the 2019 Doha World Championships 50k.
Will not be too phased by that.
Yeah, 29 years old, very experienced. Now, Mara, of course, for those viewers who may not be familiar with the rules, yes, the basic rules are fairly straightforward, but then it gets more complicated when we start talking about the judges and how they watch the athletes and can hand out penalties.
That's right. So the basic rule, there is one rule in race walking with 2 parts, and that rule is as follows. Race walking is a progression of steps so taken that the walker makes contact with the ground so that no visible, to the human eye, loss of contact occurs. The advancing leg must be straightened, i.e. not bent at the knee, from the moment of first contact with the ground until the vertical upright position. So the first part of that rule is known as loss of contact. So one foot has to be in contact with the ground at all times. And the second part is the bent knee part, so the advancing leg must be straight until it passes under the body. And the rule, those 2 rules, 2 parts of the rule are enforced by the judges. There are 8 judges supervised by the chief judge, which today is Zoe Eastwood Bryson from Australia. The judges are from many different countries, and they have 2 ways to enforce the rules. One is yellow paddles, so that is essentially a warning. They're saying to the athletes, I'm not satisfied that you're following the rules, I'm watching you, but it doesn't lead in any way directly to disqualification. And then the red cards, and there is Zoe Eastwood Bryson, the chief judge. So the second mechanism the judges use is red cards. So when they believe that an athlete has broken either part of the rule, they will issue a red card. The athlete does not see that red card, but it's recorded and will appear on those boards on the right of our screen there. No red cards at the moment. And if an athlete receives 3 red cards from different judges, they have to serve a penalty in the penalty zone, which for this race will last 3.5 minutes. so it's 1 minute per 10 kilometres. And then if they receive a 4th red card, then they will be disqualified. And to avoid excessive taking of liberties in the very final stages of the race, the chief judge can disqualify outright an athlete even if they have no red cards.
That's just to stop somebody sprinting, literally running that last few dozen meters. Yes.
Yeah, and the chief judge can change the position of the judges during the course of the race.
Well, back to this men's field. They opened with a 4:57 first kilometre. That's because much of it was uphill. Then their second kilometre was a 4:34. They've gone through 3 kilometres in 14:18 to make it a 4:47. And again, of course, so much of that third kilometre was uphill. So we're going to see this sort of seesawing in tempo where the downhill strip is considerably quicker and makes some of the splits much faster than others. It should almost alternate because of the way that they started down towards the bottom of the slope, and much of that first kilometre was uphill therefore. There you can see the leader getting a yellow warning disc, and that is perhaps to be expected really when somebody pushes to the front like that and breaks away at a much quicker pace than the rest of the field. The judges will be looking very carefully at their form.
And the judges can move across the course freely. And so that was a yellow paddle, loss of contact for the leader. So the little wavy line, that is loss of contact, and a small arrow, which we'll no doubt see later, that would be for bent knee. So 1 yellow paddle. It's interesting that athletes who are out on their own, obviously much easier for the judges to see than when they're in a big group.
Yes, the judges, of course, can be working and observing athletes on both sides of the road going in opposite directions because of their position on the course. The judges can move around within their sector to observe the athletes. Here's the turnaround at the bottom end of the course, the lower end. They've been walking northwards with a slight breeze in their faces. Now they turn and head on the uphill journey, so to speak. The uphill side of the 1 kilometre long strip, and with the wind on their backs makes it quite a lot tougher. Temperature will be climbing, of course, through the morning, although the 7 o'clock start time for these athletes in the men's field, the 65 of them, was fairly sympathetic.
Yeah, the wind, according to the weather forecast, the wind is about 6 miles an hour, so very gentle breeze, so reasonably good conditions. But as you said, the temperature rising all the time. It was 24 degrees at the start, but we're expecting it to rise to 28 by 9 o'clock and 29 by 10 o'clock.
So Miroslav Uradnik of Slovakia is the man in view. Uradnik, the 25-year-old, is a 2:37 performer. He's a high-caliber performer. That was last year. And just looking at his form from recent championships, well, he was 22nd in the Europeans in Berlin back in 2018 over 20 kilometres, 41st in Sapporo last year at the Olympic Games. So this is a bold move for him to go out so early on. Only 19 minutes on the clock, and the Slovakian has decided to get motoring along and try and move at what he feels is the optimal pace for himself.
Slovakia, of course, is the country of Matej Tot, the Olympic champion from Rio.
Well, at 4K, the time for the leading athletes, 18:46. Uradnik had a 2 or 3 second lead at that point, but they clearly have closed up. That lead is less than a second now. Alvaro Lopez of Spain, one of the top 3 or 4 favourites prior to the gun, is there. So is Jose Luis Doctor of Mexico. It's the Mexican that has the surname Doctor. Fabulous surname. I bet that leaves some confusion in life. But yeah, the chasing pack beginning to thin out. There's about 8 or 10 in the immediate wake of Uradnik. And this upslope, remember, they are negotiating this gradual climb up towards the highest point now. He's working pretty hard, isn't he? Puffing hard, little glance over his shoulder there. He'd have liked to have seen a bigger gap, I suspect, but Doctor and Martin of Spain. Right breathing down his neck, looking untroubled at the moment.
So one of the Omani athletes into the penalty zone already, so he will have, that is Al-Nadabi, sorry, he will have 3 red cards.
Al-Nadabi from Oman.
Just checking on my computer. Which of the infringements he's in there for.
You can see there the Omanis, who are inexperienced, relative newcomers to the sport of race walking and indeed this distance. They're all to do with bent knee, of incorrect technique from the Omanis. And Al-Nadabi here having to sit out, well, 3.5 minutes of time penalty. Look at that, their entire team suffering penalties, unfortunately, or at least 2 of them now. Al-Hinai will be coming into the penalty zone as well, and that's a long time to have to sit there and watch the opposition go by.
Yeah. It's relatively early in the race to have 3 red cards, but there we have the 3.5 minute instruction in the penalty zone. So the athletes just have to wait patiently there before they can return to the race.
Frustrating for these athletes, irrespective of their performance level and experience. They know full well that 3.5 minutes, well, the best athletes will be covering the bigger part of a kilometre in that time. It's a huge amount of time to have to sit and watch others perform. You're losing a huge amount of ground on the entire field, and it's early to be getting a penalty too, only 22 minutes into the race. There's that turnaround at the upper end of the course. You can see the convention centre roof over to the right of picture. The athletes now are heading along one of the flatter sections of the circuit before passing through what will be their finish line in a couple of hours' time. For a lucky few, we are expecting the winning time to be, well, around 2.5 hours, maybe somewhere in the mid 2:30s. As we see the Slovakian again still moving really well is Oradnik, and he's trying to get a gap on that chasing pack, but while not really opening up a gap on his immediate pursuers, what it is doing is breaking down that pack. So from being about 15 or 20 strong a few minutes ago, there are gaps beginning to appear, and this may be doing some of the main protagonists who are better known a bit of a favour, really. It's tidying up the race early on. 5K 23:28, and just looking at what that might mean, it's still what about 4:45 tempo, Mara, they're moving at. When you think that the
still very pedestrian
it's
for the
about
men.
2:45 tempo rather, and the with the world best down in the 2:27s, it makes you realise how slowly they started off, and what an effect that hill and the conditions are having upon the overall time and the performance of even the best athletes.
So we've heard that Al-Hinai of Oman has received a 4th red card, so that means sadly he will be disqualified. And Al-Nadabi, another Omani athlete, also on 4 red cards, so sadly 2 of the host nation men's team now disqualified.
So Oradnik getting to that drink station in the lead, but a line of 3 or 4 of the big names right behind him, including Martin of Spain, Alvaro Martin, the European champion in 2018 in Berlin at 20k. And there's confirmation of the demise of 2 of the Omanis, Al-Hinai and Al-Nadabi, both disqualified because of a 4th red card. Al-Nadabi we saw in the penalty zone just 3 or 4 minutes ago. He must have picked up another red almost as soon as he left the zone. Goodness me. The technique is very hard to maintain when you're tired. You can see it, all this men's field taking on liquids early in the race. You have to do that, keep topping up. There's Dominic King of Great Britain walking with one of the Brazilians, Diaz.
Dominic King is the oldest athlete in this men's field, 38 years old.
Well, there's the women's leader, and it is Priyanka Goswami, who is moving with that men's pack for much of the first 20 minutes. Now the company around her has thinned out very significantly. She's a tiny figure. I mean, she stood out in some of those aerial shots we saw about 10 minutes ago for being so minuscule compared with the men around her. But I wonder whether or not her sneaking away with the men, almost hidden amongst that men's pack, has enabled her to get a gap on some of the rest of the ladies, Mara.
She's got a massive lead, 1 minute 53 through 5k on the rest of the women's field. And I wonder if some of the women aren't even aware that she's ahead of them. But it is very early days, remember, in these very difficult, tough conditions. And there's Nick Christie on the right-hand side for the USA.
There's a clear indication of the size of that lead. Almost 2 minutes ahead of Zaziblo of Poland. And then the main pack a further 4 seconds back with Lee and Wu and Bai and Ma, the Chinese quartet, all there. Carro of Mexico. Well, she's moving well, and certainly the Indians are building quite a reputation for world-class walking. Had some great results yesterday. One of the Omani athletes there being lapped 3.60. That is Al-Baimani, Zakaria Al-Baimani. We saw him, he's the youngster, just 21 years old. We saw him in the introductions at the start of the race. And here is that chasing women's pack, the main pack, with all the main protagonists in it. Li Maokuo of China is there with the white cap to right of picture. Virtually the shortest in that pack, but it's all about flexibility and strength in the hips. If you can maintain a good stride length, then you don't need to have quite the same cadence. You can see 3.62 there in that Omani squad, Al-Nadabi. In fact, I thought we heard that he was disqualified, Abdul Al-Nadabi, but he's still out there on the course, moving at clearly a much slower rate and not displaying the technique of world-class walkers. It is more about a gesture of representation, the Omani walkers over these 2 days, than it is about really being in the challenge or contesting for top places. But their time will come from small acorns, as they say. Escariz wearing a 718. Carmen Escariz of Spain, the 23-year-old, moving well. 38th in the World Team Championships Junior 10K, the under 20 10K, back in 2016. Now she's in the senior ranks, and it is a different ball game, much higher standard, of course, and that is so often the case with age group athletes. They can shine very often because of sheer talent and with a modicum of training, but once you get thrown into the senior ranks, then it becomes a far more serious affair, and you really do have to step up your game. That's the experience of the majority of athletes moving from the age groups into senior levels anyway.
So no red cards showing at present excuse me, in the women's race. We actually had no disqualifications excuse me, in the women's under 20 race, the very first race of these championships. So all good at the moment.
Ziblo, Katarzyna Ziblo, the Pole, still maintaining that nice relaxed style, just a few meters ahead of the pack. 3 times the Polish champion at 20 kilometers. Liz Ziblo holds the Polish record at 35 kilometers, by the way, with 2:50 from last year, 2:50.54. And to finish to be in the top 10 for this year, you need to have walked 2:48. So she is very high caliber performer, quite capable of making the top 10 today in this women's field of 34 participants.
Interesting seeing her overtaking one of the male athletes there. The results are, of course, scored separately, although the men and women have started together.
Because one of the Romanian athletes there, Gafita, Andre Gafita, came second in the Francophone Games, 20 kilometers back in 2017. That is one of the anomalies of the Francophone Games. They've allowed countries like Romania in now, when you would think, by definition, that is a little strange.
So the Polish athlete with a small gap on the chasing group. Interesting, she's got that, I don't want to call it a scarf, but something round her neck, probably with ice cubes in it. We've seen a lot of that going on yesterday, the Chinese athletes as well, and every time they go past their personal refreshment station, they've been getting a new one, some of them having ice cubes in their hats, so very much trying to keep cool. World Athletics are conducting a heat study around this race. They've been calling for volunteers from amongst the athletes to participate, and the athletes will ingest a tiny capsule the size of a normal tablet, which can monitor body temperature, and also they would tape a capsule to the skin of the athletes before the start, which measures skin temperature, and then the athletes are weighed before and after the race. So that's just a way for World Athletics to gather useful information about what sort of heat acclimatization strategies are effective.
Well, we saw Priyanka Goswami, the leader there. She has got a red card, we're told, though. Now, a warning card for Goswami. In fact, not Priyanka, no. That's just to clarify that it's one of the Americans who's got a red card, Stephanie Casey, apparently. Priyanka moving well. And, of course, the subcontinent, India, has sweltering temperatures for much of the year. I go out to the Mumbai Marathon in January most years, and it reaches 30 degrees in the afternoons in Mumbai in January, and that is their coolest time of the year. It's when the Mumbai Marathon normally takes place, although of course as with most venues, the pandemic has had a drastic effect on the road racing timetable in India this last couple of years. But Priyanka, isn't she moving well? Really good cadence, and there the other athletes might get a look at her. I wonder if they're all aware that she's that far ahead. They will be getting information, Mara, from their team officials and teammates along the course. So
yes, that's right.
It's not just down to their own what they see themselves. Yes,
that's right. The officials can be feeding them information. Of course, they can glance across the course as well. Just at the back of that group a moment ago, we saw Spain's Laura Garcia Carro. She's ranked third in 2022 of the athletes on the start list. She was really hopeful. I spoke to her last week. She's really hopeful for a medal here, and she's absolutely up for the 35k, and really glad that it's definitely been decided that women will contest 35k, because there was always that doubt about 50k, which made it a bit difficult for them to decide whether to go for it. And she's getting ready for the Summer Championships, so nice, really using her hips there.
Yeah, Garcia Carro at the back of that group. Actually looks like she's struggling a little bit, Mara, back in what, about 15th place, something like that?
Just hanging on to the back of that group. Yeah, she was a bit mystified why they're on this course with quite a strong gradient. As we said earlier, this is the biggest gradient ever used in a championship event. And of course, the athletes will have known that for a while, and they will have been able to train on a similar course.
Interesting, Mara, you were talking about the fact that some athletes are wearing, and this looks like a disqualification in the men's race. It's Al Hinai who is being pulled off the course, I'm afraid. Another of the Omanis. His day's racing coming to an end. But of course the judges have to remain totally unbiased and objective in their assessment of the athletes, whatever vest colours they may be wearing. Back to the front end of the men's race now, and it's still Uradnik of Slovakia, who leads. He's just maintaining this 4 or 5 meter lead over the pack. I suppose one advantage of this, Mara, and it's a very minor advantage, but it accumulates, is that he's got cool air, or at least fresh air, passing over his body. And if you're back in that pack, you're not really getting quite that same amount of fresh, still air passing over your body. And cumulatively, over a half an hour or 2 hours, that will make a big difference. Minute by minute, almost zero difference.
Yeah, I mean, on a windy day, we often see athletes tucking in behind the leader to avoid the wind. But on a day like this, you might want a bit more breeze. It's only a gentle breeze. And of course, any liquid you have on the surface of your skin, whether that's sweat or water you've thrown over yourself, when that evaporates, it cools you down. And that will be absolutely crucial for these athletes, including in these early stages. You know, you don't want to allow yourself to heat up and then have to deal with it later. You really need to work from the beginning to keep yourself cool. I raced in Osaka in Japan in the 2007 World Championships, where it was 30 at the start and 31 at the finish, and right from the start everybody was using sponges and really keeping cool.
You raced there. I was commentating there. It was tough enough just sitting in the stands commentating on you guys. Never mind about actually racing 26 miles or 42 kilometres.
Funnily enough, I spent 2 weeks heat acclimatising in Tokyo at home before that, and on race day I felt fine, to be honest, despite it being 30 degrees. So if you nail your heat acclimatisation, it really is okay competing in these sorts of conditions. If you haven't been able to heat acclimatise, that's when it's very difficult. And it's interesting, actually, that you know, this venue really suits athletes coming from tropical countries or southern hemisphere countries where it's currently winter. In fact, we heard from the Australian coach Brent Valance that it's midsummer there, so favourable for their athletes. And we've got a few red cards coming in the men's race now. So Andres Chocho of Ecuador, a country with a long history and proud tradition of race walking, he's on 1 card for loss of contact. He is the coach, as we said earlier, of Glenda Morejon in the women's race. Amoris Carua, also of Ecuador, he's also on 1 for loss of contact. Wang, one of the Chinese athletes, Wang Zhenhao, on 1 for bent knee. Pinzon of Colombia on 1 for loss of contact. So still only 1 red card for some of the athletes.
14 in this lead men's pack, by the way. Uradnik just being swallowed up by the pack now. They've gone through 8 kilometres in 36:59, and with a 4 kilometre split of 18:46, I can tell you that this second 4K segment, up to 4 laps completed, much quicker than the opening 4K. So they've eased into their task, have the men. We know that that first kilometre was desperately slow at almost 5 minutes, but it has picked up over the last 20 minutes or so. And Lopez of Spain, Miguel Angel Lopez nearest the camera there to write a picture. He is very much amongst the favourites. Former world and European champion at 20k. He's 33 years old now. He was 11th in Rio, the Olympic Games back in 2016 in Brazil at 20k. And then last summer, well, he didn't have a great time of it in Sapporo, 31st in the Olympic 20k in 2021.
So the Spanish athletes, they're well up there in the lead group. They've got a very strong national squad, supervised by their head coach Santiago Perez. There was some discussion about is the schedule this year too busy with this championships and then the Oregon World Championships, and of course there's the Europeans, Commonwealth, World Under-20s, but Perez seemed to think there was a big enough gap between this championship and the summer.
There's Lopez, his personal best 2:27.53. That was earlier on this year. That was in the Spanish 35 kilometres. He won by more than 2 minutes when he broke the Spanish record of Valentin Massana, which had stood since 1993. Well, Spain, with such a rich walking tradition, did have a 35k record. And most nations don't have. The vast majority of athletes have never walked 35k, but it's obviously a distance recognised in the Iberian Peninsula for many, many years now, several decades. In fact, the water being poured over the heads aplenty. And now Lopez seems to be happy to take on the burden of being the leader, the man just with his nose in front. Linker of Germany there, the tall figure in the yellow cap. To the left of picture, Christopher Linker was, well, he's a good athlete. 5th in the Rio Olympic Games. He was 5th in the London World Championships the following year. And then, can you believe, 5th in Sapporo last year. Almost cursed. And just to confound those who thought, well, surely he deserves a medal here or there, he was 4th in the European Championships in Zurich back in 2014. This is all at 20k. And 4th in the World Championships in Doha in 2019. He's 33 now. He must be so desperately wanting a medal in a major global championship. He does have a bronze from the World Cup in 2012 at 50k, but not in those global championships that have higher profile, like the Olympics or World Athletics World Championships.
We saw several other German athletes in that lead group. There's Christopher Linker you were talking about earlier, Tim, and Jonathan Hilbert also, we saw a moment ago. He's the silver medalist from Sapporo last year. So Germany, one of the countries with a full team here. The other nations represented with full teams in the men's race: Brazil, China, Ecuador, Spain, Germany, Italy, India, Japan, Oman, Poland and the USA.
The men that go through there with 13 laps to go. 41.43 their time, and that is, I think, at 9 kilometers. As we see Priyanka, the women's leader since the start of the race, Priyanka Goswami, the 17th place at the games last year in Sapporo, but she does have a red card, we understand. She is pushing very hard. She'll be getting information, I'm sure, from the sidelines of the fact that she has got a good gap over the main part of the field, and she may be here, Mara, sort of knowingly using up lives, so to speak, because you can almost regard these red cards as lives that they can use to maintain that gap.
Yes, but I mean, it's still relatively early stages. You know, through 8k, she was on 1 red card for loss of contact with a 2-minute 27 lead over second place. Massive lead. So she's gone off really quite aggressively. And of course, if she gets 3 red cards, she'll be serving a 3.5-minute penalty.
Well, she did set off very hard indeed. She's gone through 8k in 37.48, and at that point, yeah, that lead has grown dramatically. 2.5 minutes, Priyanka's lead. In fact, she's just gone through 9k in 42.48. So no wonder she's picked up a red card. She is pushing very, very hard indeed. Her time at 4k was 18.59. That's effectively 19 minutes. So she accelerated through the second 4k, just like the men did as well. Warming to the task, if you'll forgive the pun, is Priyanka. Tough though, Mara. What a tough way to do it out on your own like this. I mean, I know that she covered the first few kilometers as part of the men's pack, who were moving unusually slowly, but she's been isolated for a long time now, and yet maintaining a tempo that is quicker than this main women's pack, with Wu at the front.
Yeah, I mean, she looked reasonably comfortable, but she's gone out at quite a pace with an enormous gap so early in the race.
Well, Wu Kanming, that is, the pre-race favourite, has had very good recent form, winning that Chinese trial at 35 kilometres back in the middle of January. Only 20 years old, mind you. Almost young enough to have performed in the under-20 women's race yesterday over 10 kilometres. But here's Priyanka Goswami turning it on in dramatic style. She is flying.
Yep. So amongst that trailing women's group, the Polish athlete, Lee Muaokao of China, all the Chinese athletes, Bonilla of Ecuador, Guerrero of Mexico, Morejon of Ecuador, Paula Perez of Ecuador, the Peruvian athlete Evelyn Inga. She'll be inspired by her teammate Kimberly Garcia Leon's fabulous bronze yesterday in the 20k. And at the back of that group, I think, was the Czech athlete Durdiakova, followed by Laura Garcia Carro. Spanish athletes really looking to do well in the team competition. In the women's race, there are full teams from Brazil, China, Ecuador, Spain and Italy. Of course, it's 3 to score in the senior races. 5 athletes can start per country, but it's 3 to score. They each score points according to their finishing order, and the team with the...
Well, there we are. The gap behind Priyanka has closed a little bit. It's 2 minutes 21 seconds now. At 8K it was 2:27. At 9K now it's 2:21. So that pack with the Chinese Lee and Wu at the front of it has pulled back 6 seconds. Now that might not be a lot, but that is in the space of 1 kilometre, and there are many kilometres to go yet. They've only covered 9. They've got 26 kilometres to go. And that will, if they carried on that rate of closing on Priyanka Goswami, they would indeed catch up. And I sort of think, Mara, if that pack starts working together, the Chinese in particular walking in unison, as they did yesterday in every race, then there may be a quick closing on the Indian.
Yeah, we've certainly seen some teamwork in the last 24 hours from the Chinese athletes. But Priyanka can, I mean, she's on her own there, but she's been overtaking the men, so...
You can see there Priyanka at 9K has a lead of, what, about 500 metres on the main women's pack. And she's enjoying a downhill slope at the moment. And the women's pack here closing on one of the American men, that's Dan Neneva.
We just saw at the back of that group, looked like one of the Chinese athletes might have been dropped. That was Ma Feiying trying to hang on to the back of that group. She was 5th at the last edition of this event, and also in the Doha 2019 World Championships 50k.
Well, they're working together now. Li Maokuo and Wu Kanming, there's no doubt about it. Li, the athlete, absolutely at the front, is the silver medalist from the last World Championships. Very experienced. And there you can see the gap, or at least they get a chance to see each other. Priyanka Goswami of India in that blue strip, walking superbly. But I rather sense that that cadence has slowed a little bit. From side on, it looks like she's moving really well, but has that speed reduced? We'll give you the splits at 10k. Remember, the gap has gone from 2 minutes 27 to 2:21 between 8 and 9k, and we'll give you that 10k split as soon as we can, so that we can tell you what the gap is now. Now Priyanka has gone through 10k in 47:26, so that was only about half a minute ago, so we'll need a couple of minutes yet before we can give you an update on whether that women's pack continues to close on the little Indian.
A very few red cards still in the women's race. Priyanka on 1, and the 2 athletes we mentioned earlier for bent knee, Quig of Finland and Casey of the USA. But the women so far, everybody walking with very good technique. This is very much a team event, Tim, hence the name. It's the team championships, and of course with each country able to start 5 athletes, unlike in the Olympics where it's 3 athletes, you get greater depth from the powerhouses of race walking like Ecuador, Spain, China and so on. And there is team prize money up for grabs as well in the senior races. The first team gets $15,000, second $12,000, and down to 6th with 3,000. No prize money for individuals, but there is for the teams.
Well, the men have gone through 10 kilometres in 46:03. Remember, Priyanka Goswami went through in the women's in 47:26. So the men about 1 minute 23 ahead of her. And Juradnik back to the front, determined to make it count, his presence count, and keep the pace honest. Perhaps if there's any slackening, he is pushing on, or is he just putting in surges? Another of the Germans is there. Linker, the best known of them. That is Hilbert, Jonathan Hilbert. I say actually the best known, of course. This is the top German, the Olympic silver medalist from Sapporo last year over 50 kilometres, coached by Ronald Weigel, as is Linker. Quite a surprise to be Olympic silver medalist for Hilbert, the German, after finishing 23rd at the World Championships in 2019. Maybe he didn't like the heat there, but then it was pretty hot in Sapporo, and it's pretty hot today. So Hilbert, 26 years old, making his debut at 35 kilometers today. There he is in that gold German vest in the center of the group, with the black scarf around his neck. I say scarf, black. What do you call it? A kerchief, or is that too old English?
Ice holder.
Ice holder, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we haven't seen him, but the ambassador for this event is retired Spanish athlete Jesus Garcia. Incredible 8 times Olympian and 13 times representative for Spain in the World Championships and in this Team Championships event. And we were talking earlier about Priyanka perhaps using the men to, you know, get away from the women's field and for a bit of pacing. And apparently Garcia did help one of the Spanish women in that event where there was a mixed start. So I'm sure the Spanish team are inspired by his incredible record. 8 times he's represented Spain in the Olympics.
Well, this men's pack is about 14 strong. Their first 5 kilometers, by the way, was 23:28. Their second 5 kilometers, 22:35. So a massive acceleration from the men in their second 5 kilometers through to 10k. They went through in 46:03, and then 50:43 for 11k. So that kilometer has taken them, what, 4:40, that 11th kilometer. When you think their opening kilometers were the 4:57, then I think they're settling to more of a rhythm now. Banik there, getting a bit of ice, I think, in that hat, hence its funny shape in that white peaked cap.
And just on the left of the screen there was Sweden's Carlstrom, the 20k bronze medalist from Doha. Going up into the 35k. His mother, Siv Gustafsson, was the winner here back in 1977 and 1981 over 5k. The women previously contested 5k, then 10k, then moved up to 20k. So,
well, some wonderful imagery coming at us from both the men's and women's races. There's a frantic feel to the speed they're moving up, but let's take a look at it in a slightly more sedate style of viewing. Well, back to this men's pack with still the isolated figure of Miroslav Uradnik of Slovakia, pushed along at the front in the white hat from that very closely packed men's pack. If it was a running race, I'd be really worried with the proximity of those athletes to each other. You'd probably see somebody go down. Walking, of course, slightly less concern is needed when they're so close to each other.
All 4 Germans in that lead pack. We've got slightly bad news for Marc Tour of Spain. He's on 1 red card for bent knee, but other than him, everybody in that lead group is on 0 red cards. In the second group, Amores Carua of Ecuador is on 1 red card for loss of contact. And there's 1 Japanese athlete in that group, that is Masatora Kawano. He was 6th at the Olympic Games in the 50k, the national record holder for 50k from 2019. So a couple of the American athletes there being swallowed up, being lapped by this leading men's group. As we expected, the 2 top Spanish athletes Miguel Lopez and Alvaro Martin very much to the fore.
Don't they look relaxed, that Spanish pairing too? It's almost like there's an optical illusion, because there doesn't seem the same urgency in the way they walk, and that comes down to how hard they're working with the arms, which enables that long stride length. They're both quite tall. Of course, there's two Spanish in the dark glasses there. Lopez to the right. There's the team standings, by the way, at 11k, Mara. Yep. Real battle going on there for those top places. Look, a real separation after Germany down to 4th place, but wow, that's close.
Yeah, very close. I mean, they're all in that lead group, so it's difficult to separate them really at the moment, but we'll keep an close eye on those team standings. And just at the back on the right of that lead group is Percy Carlstrom of Sweden. Apparently he's the 3rd cousin of the new US women's marathon record holder, Kira D'Amato. Both his parents very famous race walkers, his father Mexican, so from a very athletic family. All the Chinese athletes in there. So in that lead group in the men, we have Slovakia, 4 Germans, 1, 2, 3, 4 Chinese athletes. Doctor from Mexico, Ortiz from Mexico, and Kawano of Japan. Oyala, the Finnish athlete, also just off the back of that lead group.
Interesting, isn't it, that some athletes choose to have a sort of handkerchief tied around their necks, which they drench with ice cold water, and the Chinese women, for example, seem almost all of them to have that pink cloth around their necks to keep them cool, but a lot of athletes don't bother, and yet you think of it, it really is an established assistance. Then why doesn't everybody do it? There's the splits at 12 kilometers, or the group at 12 kilometers, I should say. Oradnik just keeping his nose in front there, determined to maintain his presence just in the lead, so he gets the cool air and the breeze on the northern leg of each lap.
Yeah, I mean, the athletes will all have different protocols for keeping themselves cool in conditions like this, and of course with championships typically taking place in the summer, and with climate change, you know, competing in hot conditions is going to be well, much more common into the future. And World Athletics doing a lot of work on environmental issues and sustainability, of which the heat study they're doing, which we mentioned earlier, is part. So World Athletics really trying to help the athletes with research on what the best heat acclimatization strategies might be.
Still 14 men in this lead pack, by the way, with 1 or 2 athletes just beginning to peel off the back, including Zhaxi Yangben of China, who is 9 seconds down on this pack at 12k. The last, that 12th kilometre, by the way, 4:25 on this men's pack. They are beginning to move pretty smoothly now. That would end up in that's a 2:34 tempo, and that is very quick for these conditions. But of course there is this seesawing variation in the splits with the uphill and downhill nature of each side of the 2 kilometre loop.
Very tall.
Yes, quite a lot of variation, and we saw at the end of the women's 20k yesterday the athletes really struggling on this uphill section. Tucked into that group, the slightly diminutive figure of Ortiz, Ricardo Ortiz of Mexico, a 2:30.07 for him on the 30th of January this year. So one of the athletes showing a good time in 2022.
Here's the chasing pack, 14 in that men's lead pack. Quignon of France is amongst this chasing pack, as you can see. Aurélien Quignon, the 29-year-old, who's the French 30 kilometers champion from last year. Also there, one of the Indian walkers. I think it was Singh, Chandan Singh. No, there is Singh. So it was Ram Babu who was in that chasing pack. And one of the Irish athletes goes through. Just trying to see who that was. That was Brendan Boyce, I think, who's a very consistent walker. He's the only Irishman in this field. He was 6th at the World Championships in Doha back in 29 over 50 kilometres, 10th in the Olympic Games last year in Sapporo. He was coached by Rob Heffernan, but maybe athletes will move through the second half, Murray. You know, 1 hour on the clock now. There's an awful lot of hard walking to come, and we're expecting the men's winning time to be what, around 2:34, something like that. That would be great walking in these conditions.
Yeah, the top times this year, 2:27, 2:29, 2:30, but in these conditions and the relatively slow pace they started off at, we're definitely expecting somewhat outside 2:30 for the finishing time. So Sweden's Percy Carlstrom stepping up to 35k after his fabulous bronze at the 2019 Doha World Championships in the 20k. I wonder if his parents... I'm sure he's inspired by his parents. His mother, of course, a two-time winner at this event in the early years. And at the press conference, he mentioned accompanying her when he was a small boy, when she was out training. So race walking very much in his family and part of his life since he was born.
By the way, we're hearing that the chasing pack in the women's race is closing on Priyanka Goswami pretty quickly. She's covered her last 2 kilometers in 9:55. The Slovakian Uradnik still pushing on hard and trying to break down that group indirectly by being at the front there. There is Lee in the women's race. Lee Marquardt, the World Championship silver medalist from 3 years ago. Now she is closing her time for the last 2 kilometers, 9:29. She's actually made 26 seconds over the last 9.5 minutes on Priyanka Goswami. So the Indian is being reeled in, there's no doubt about it, and you can see from this shot that Lee has set out on her own, maybe getting information from the sidelines that it is time to move it up a gear and start closing on the little Indian. Perhaps the Chinese team management or coaches were getting a little concerned that the gap had grown so big. Don't let's forget that it was 2 minutes 25 seconds at 10k, and if anything it was growing slightly, but the 29-year-old Lee Mara has made a big move in the last 10 minutes or so since we saw the ladies, and has got a gap on the pack.
Yeah, interesting that she's gone off on her own. We've seen the Chinese athletes very much working together, but it's just possible some of these athletes may not be aware that, well, as you know, they will have seen her when they've done the switchbacks. So Lee in pursuit of the Indian athlete. Priyanka Lee is, of course, the silver medalist from the Doha World Championships 50k. Personal best of 2:46.12 set last year. She was second in the trial race, the Chinese trial race for this competition.
Well, at 12k, the 13k mark has been reached by Priyanka Goswami. She is 62.35 at that mark. But at 12k, so about 5 minutes ago, the gap was down to 1 minute 59, having grown to almost 2.5 minutes at around the 8 to 10k section of the race. So without any doubt, this is a big surge from Lee of China.
And we just saw her doing a hand gesture across the course there. I'm wondering if it was to one of her teammates, or I think it must have been, because the team officials aren't allowed onto the middle of the course there. But anyway, Lee in hot pursuit of the leader, Priyanka.
And in case you're wondering about the bandages that the Chinese athletes wear across their navels, their tummy buttons, it was asked, wasn't it, Mara? And the answer was something to do with wind resistance. I mean, I seriously, I think that's a tongue-in-cheek answer. I don't understand.
Jane Saville, Australian race walking icon from the past, told us she had a conversation with an official, a Chinese official, and it was something to do with air passing through, stopping air passing through. I mean, athletes, you know, marginal gains, they try to do everything possible to improve their performance, and that might be one of those things.
Well, we have had a report of a dropout, Rui Coelho of Portugal, the 27-year-old Portuguese record holder at 35k. apparently has called it a day. There's no news of any disqualification for him. It is choosing to drop out, clearly something not quite right. And it's so easy to forget that these athletes are not machines. They do have the normal ailments and problems that beset us mere mortals. They are supreme athletes, but of course they do have problems. We'll see Coelho's dropping out, I think, shortly. Won the Portuguese, yes, there he is, 3.70. He won the Portuguese indoor 5,000 meters just recently. The Portuguese clubs 5,000 as well, just a couple of weeks ago. But clearly not everything is right for him. Very experienced athlete too. So that's a sorry sight. We haven't actually had much of that, Mara. We've seen disqualifications. We've been seen people in the penalty zone. But I don't think we've seen many athletes just dropping out because of
very
not feeling great.
Yeah, which is surprising given the tough conditions. So the athletes really doing their absolute best to finish, which is great to see. Just checking in on the team competition in the women's race. With Lee there in pursuit. Through 11k, it was China on top, Ecuador in second, and Spain in third, with Italy fourth.
Incidentally, news of this women's race and how that gap is closing. Priyanka went through 13 kilometers in 62.35. Lee in 64.08. The gap is down to 1:33. So between 12k and 13k, it's gone from 1:59, almost 2 minutes, down to 1:33, almost a minute and a half. She is closing incredibly quickly. She's covered that 13th kilometer nearly half a minute quicker than Priyanka Goswami of India, and they are nowhere near halfway yet. So various dramas unfolding on the roads of Muscat early in this morning. That was the leader, Goswami.
I just wondered, Tim, if she looked like she was struggling a little compared to earlier. She had her head down. So Lee, still very few red cards in the women's race.
There is confirmation of that 1:33 gap between the Indian Priyanka Goswami and Lee of China, making the chase now a very serious affair. Lee Monquo, who is out on her own, 6 seconds ahead of Ziblo of Poland. Ziblo chasing hard, it has to be said, and then a further 5 seconds back to that pack of 5 with Wu and the Ecuadorians, Mojon, Ordonez, Perez. They're working together. They're packing really well, the Ecuadorians.
They certainly are, yeah. I was expecting great things from Morejon, but the other Ecuadorians, Bonilla and Perez, going great in that lead group. Just a reminder that this is a new championship event over 35k. It has been contested a fair bit in the past. Was regularly contested in the late 80s and 90s in an 8 nations match involving several European countries. So it's not. And I think that was a yellow paddle for Lee. Yeah, that was definitely a warning to Lee. The judge showing it to her, so definitely a yellow paddle rather than a red card.
That is Lee on the upslope, passing through what was the start line for the 35-kilometer walkers. And that's the team standings at 13 kilometers. Remember, 35 kilometers, so this is not much more than 1/3 of the overall distance done. But China leading by 16 with 16 points to Ecuador's 18 is very tight indeed. The Ecuadorians having a fabulous day at the races so far in the women's 35k. Now, you're right, Mara, you said she looks a little tired, and I think she is. There's not quite the same power to that stride. She's turning the legs over well, but there's not the same power, and I think that starts affecting your stride length. And of course, if the length of each step is a few centimeters less, then it has a dramatic cumulative effect on your overall tempo.
Yeah, she's the sole representative from India in this race, and we've just had news that the Polish athlete Ziblo Katarzyna in third, she has a red card, 1 red card for loss of contact. And Priyanka also still on 1 for loss of contact. But other than that, very few red cards so far in the women's race.
And that gap at 14k, well, listen to this, it's gone from 159 between 11 and 12k to 133 between 12 and 13k. And from 13 to 14k, the gap has gone down to 111. It is closing with dramatic speed. The gap is being shut down by Li Maokuo of China. And if she maintains this, she will be on the shoulder of Priyanka Goswami within 3 or 4 kilometers. I wonder if Goswami is getting that information, if she's getting the feedback.
And that is Na being lapped, I think. So Na of China, Guo Na, 3rd in the trial race for China, not having a good day. Personal best of 2:48.26, the 22-year-old.
There it is, confirmation of that gap between Lee and the leader Priyanka is down to 1 minute 11. A kilometre ago it was 1:33. She's taken 22 seconds out of her in the last kilometre. Ziblo with a warning card, and Lee has got one as well. Both of them having to chase hard to try and close on that big gap that Priyanka built up over the opening 10 or 11 kilometres. But 10 seconds between Lee and Ziblo. And then the chase group with Yaramillo, 1 minute 26 further back. Here she is. It's been a fabulous first, hour and 10 minutes, hour and 11 minutes from Priyanka Goswami, the Indian record holder at 20k. I wonder, though, Mara, this is a debut at 35k, if she isn't now beginning to realise that perhaps she's overcooked it and not taken into account that this is nearly double her normal racing distance.
Yeah, she's definitely not looking as fresh as she was earlier. Just wonder if she's gone off a little bit too fast. Still only on 1 red card, and she'll be keeping a close eye on Lee, who is chasing fast. Lee covered the last 2k some 50-odd seconds faster. She's a former gymnast, Priyanka, from Uttar Pradesh.
Alvaro Lopez of Spain, the 22-year-old, go 4th in the Spanish 35k, eases past her. That's him lapping Priyanka Goswami, I think, and we can see the men there in the left screen with Urbanik still pushing on. Miroslav Uradnik still maintaining that 4 or 5 meter gap. It's clearly the way he prefers things to be. He's moving at pretty much the same tempo as them, but just it's nearly for the last 45 minutes about 4 or 5 meters ahead of that big pack, which is about 13 strong. Plenty of Spanish and Chinese vests in there, a couple of Germans as well, Linke and Jonathan Hilbert, the Olympic silver medalist. Linke to the left there is a huge figure. He's 1 meter 91. That's around 6'3", by far the tallest of that pack. His coach Weigel, former world record holder for 50k, will know all about what you go through psychologically and physically in races of this sort of length. And that advice has its weight in gold when you come to the sharp end of races, when the pressure is really on. Certainly
does, yes. I mean, former race walking icons, but helping the new generation. We see it in other countries. In Australia, Jared Talent also coaching some of the younger athletes. Just checking in on the team competition in the men's race. Through 13k, it was Germany, Spain and China, but very similar scores. So I think that's just because each of those countries has 3 athletes in this lead group. So very much neck and neck with the top 3 teams. Evan Dunphy, Canada's Evan Dunphy, just on the back of that group. He was some 8 seconds adrift through 16k.
Well, Linke moving up alongside Uradnik there. I just wonder whether or not that was Uradnik, the Slovakian, easing back or maybe actually beginning to suffer. I thought he was going to get swallowed up by the pack, but he's staying right there. They are on the upslope here. You can really notice here in this sort of shot how steep the incline is as they head in a southerly direction. Linke, by the way, walks for the Potsdam club, just to the east of Berlin. Very lean, 64 kilograms, and yet 6'3" tall. And there is that main pack at 16 kilometers in the men's race. And the splits there for the men at 16k. Well, 1:13.11. And again, just checking the size of that pack and looking at their splits. Yeah, there's still, well, some 16 men covered by 4 seconds at the front end of the men's field. So it's nobody yet has really done a Goswami, so to speak. A very different nature, the women's race, to this men's race, where the start was very sedate. The first 3 or 4 kilometers quite slow, and then they began to warm to the task. Well, in the women's race, of course, it was Priyanka Goswami who went off like a rocket from the gun, dragged away from the women's pack, and perhaps hidden amongst the men.
So in the women's race, Ecuador very much to the fore, but in the men's race also, Amores Carua from Ecuador is in that lead group. He seems to be the only Ecuadorian athlete in that lead group, and also on 1 red card for him. Also in that lead group, Mark Tour still on 1 bent knee red card, but otherwise 0 red cards in that lead group. And Evan Dunphy looks like he's rejoined the back of that group. Yep, there he is, Dunphy, the bronze medalist last year. Was briefly upgraded to the bronze medal in Rio as well, after a sort of altercation with one of the Japanese athletes who was initially disqualified but then reinstated to bronze. So Dunphy finished 4th there, but 2 fabulous bronze medals at Doha 2019 and last year. So Linke of Germany leading this men's race.
You mentioned Evan Dunphy at the back of the field. He walked a 10,000 metres track race in Vancouver back on the 5th of February, but his time was 46 minutes, really slow time. I'm not quite sure what happened there, whether it was terrible weather conditions or what. Or I don't even know if it was an outdoor track race or an indoor track race. I would imagine an indoor track race in Vancouver in early February. But 46.23 Dunphy was credited with there.
He's admitted that he's not in quite the shape he has been in the past, and of course, having won a bronze medal last year, I'm sure he had a good break. He says he's running for elective office in local government as well, and so thinking about what he might do next. Also working with Tim Verrett as an ambassador for a project to get ordinary people doing a lot more walking and using walking for transport, as it were. He also joined the beach cleanup a couple of days ago, staged by World Athletics as part of their sustainability strategy.
Dunphy is very much a 50k specialist. There we can see the team race, the men at 17 kilometers. The standings, Spain just easing ahead of China by 2 points. Germany on 25, remaining very much in the mix. So all to play for in the men's team competition, and of course there is prize money for the team competition down to 6th place. Now Dunphy, I wonder if this is, aside from his not being in the best of form, Mara, I just wonder whether or not this is not to his liking. 35k, he's a 50k specialist. He was 8th in the Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast back in 2018 in Australia at 20k. 50k is really his specialty, and of course that distance has been done away with. So for some of the athletes for whom 50k is very much their sweet spot, it must have been a huge disappointment that that distance was done away with, and for the future it's always going to be 35k. Yeah,
I mean, I think Evan's been quite clear that he opposed the abolishment of the 50k. That was his specialist event. A number of the race walkers opposed it, but the sport is moving on, and 35k is the new longer event. There was some debate about other distances, including the marathon distance, I gather, but 35k was settled upon, and it is definitely going to be a race for men and women going forward. Interestingly, there's going to be a mixed relay event at Paris at the next Olympics. We just caught a glimpse of another yellow paddle there. I think that was to somebody in the lead group. So the judges watching closely. Of course, when they're in a big group like this, more difficult for the judges to spot any infringements.
Radnik moves to the fore again. It's almost like he gets a cold drink or a refreshing water over his head every so often, and then accelerates away from the pack, and this is perhaps the biggest gap he's had. We can go back to the women's race very shortly, because there's big news and big changes of positions in that women's race. I said, what, 6 or 8 minutes ago, that within 3 or 4 kilometers there's a chance that Lee would catch Priyanka Goswami. Well, there to the right of picture you can see Lee of China, Lee Mao-kuo, has taken the lead, with the race having changed dramatically. 1 hour 21 on the clock, and Priyanka Goswami of India to the right in the blue. Here is that passing moment, a little glance to her left. She would have been hearing from the sidelines for the last hour and 20 minutes that she had a good lead, but she must have been aware too that she was being closed down, and that is the decisive moment so far in the women's race, with Lee, World Championship silver medalist, easing past Priyanka Goswami, who has walked supremely for around 1 hour and 15, 1 hour and 20 minutes, but maybe has just misjudged the spread of her effort over the full distance. It'll be a huge learning curve for her, Mara. As for so many of these athletes today, it is the debut for the 25-year-old Indian over 35 kilometers. She will learn from this, whereas Lee Mao-kuo has walked 2:46.12. She is one of the quickest athletes in the world this year, in fact 6th quickest in the world this year, and that knowledge you get, it's almost like making a marathon debut. You know, you're in a sea of unknown.
Absolutely.
But you come away from your first marathon, and you've like a sponge absorbing information.
Yeah, absolutely. My first marathon was a disappointment, I have to say, but a massive learning experience, and the second time went much better. Just looking down the women's order, so in 3rd place is the Polish athlete, but then we have a little group of Ecuadorians, Morejon, Perez and Jaramillo. Those three some 48 seconds off the lead at 16k, followed by a lone Ecuadorian, Bonilla. So Ecuador doing brilliantly at the moment. There they are, 7:14 and 7:17. That is Jaramillo and Perez. And then a bit further back we have Laura Garcia Carro of Spain on her own, some 1 minute 39 adrift from the leaders, and then the 2 Chinese athletes. So apart from Lee, the Chinese not quite so dominant as we've seen them in the last 24 hours.
They're the Pole Zeblo in that women's race. Now Lee has gone through 17 kilometers at 1:23, and her gap over Zeblo, who has moved past Priyanka Goswami as well, is 16 seconds. The Pole is 4 seconds up on the Indian, who has dropped back to 3rd, and I'm afraid the writing on the wall for Priyanka Goswami, although Zeblo does have a warning card, as does Priyanka Goswami. I thought Lee had a warning, but it was perhaps just a yellow disc we saw held out for the Chinese leader here. Well, at 16 kilometers, you could see Priyanka Goswami had that lead of 17 seconds over Lee. But at 17 kilometers, wow, it had turned round from 17 kilometers to 16, in fact 20 seconds, the gap from Lee to Priyanka, who dropped back to 3rd place. So a vast, over half a minute difference between Lee and Priyanka in that 17th kilometer. There's the 17-kilometer split. As you can see, Priyanka 20 seconds down, but you add that to the gap that Lee was behind her at 16 kilometers, and there is a massive difference in the tempo the two athletes are now pumping out. Zeblo, by the way, having a very, very good race. Not an anonymous race, but just getting on with the job at hand. She's in second place, and the gaps are opening behind these athletes at 17 kilometers. Mojon of Ecuador, 26 seconds behind the leader. Yaramilo of Ecuador, a further 10 seconds back. Perez of Ecuador, and then Bonilla of Ecuador, they're further back as well. Some quite big gaps. But the Ecuadorians, Mara, at 17k in 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th. I mean, brilliant packing.
Yeah, I was starting to wonder if they might be putting pressure on China, because the second Chinese athlete is down in 9th, followed by 11th for the third Chinese athlete. So through 12k, China was still on top.
Yeah.
But the Chinese not having quite as good a day today as they have been, as we saw yesterday. So so China's still ahead in the team standings, but it's really neck and neck.
Well, it is, but we have to remember, Mara, that they have a long way to go just yet. I wonder if we're going to get a halfway split. I doubt it. 17.5 kilometers. Lee went through 17k in 1:23.01, so she will be past halfway now. But we have to remember that with 17 kilometers to go, so much more can happen in this race. And of course, the fatigue and the changes of positions, so much of it happens in those last few kilometers. I think there's plenty of acts to unfold just yet.
Yes, into the second half, the athletes are certainly going to tire, and it's getting hotter all the time.
Well, the Chinese were totally dominant yesterday in the 3 races we saw her in Muscat. They took 3 individual golds and all 3 team golds as well. And if this form is maintained by Lee Marquot, then they will take gold in this women's 35 kilometers as well. And they've got plenty of representation, that men's lead pack, which is unfolding simultaneously. They're at 35k.
You can just see from that drone shot, rather cloudy today, not quite as sunny as it was yesterday, but just checking on hazy, sorry. Just checking on the weather. Currently 8:30, coming up to 8:30 local time in the morning, and the forecast for 9 a.m. is 28 degrees, rising to 29 at 10 a.m. And it's going to be full sun at 10 a.m. so very much getting hotter and tougher conditions for these athletes.
That's going to accentuate the likely changes in positions and drama in the latter stages for all these athletes. Well, the women's leader Lee, you can see Zeblo of Poland there in the white vest and the red bottoms. She's in second place, and that main men's pack is about to lap her. That men's pack still big pack, isn't it? 12-14 strong. It was 14 strong the last time we looked, and the men have gone through 19k in 1:26.53. And just looking at how many men are within, say, a couple of seconds of the front end, and it is 14. Oyala of Finland is only 3 seconds down. Takahashi of Japan 5 seconds down. So 14 in that pack. So what, 17 men really in contention. Totally different nature of race to the women's.
Yes, with that very pedestrian start, that's what you typically see. You know, men who at a faster pace would get dropped early on, still up there, but Germany doing very well. And so it's all between Spain, China and Germany.
Uradnik at the front, as he has been for the majority of this race. And the pack there, well, it's almost like if this was a middle distance race on the track, you'd say this is He's their pacemaker, just leading them along at a nice steady tempo, maintaining an honest speed. Evan Dunphy, by the way, I think I might have done him an injustice. He is very quick over 10k. I'm told that last year he actually was the world #1 in the world over 10,000 meters on the track with 38.39, a national record on the track. And apparently that very slow 10k he was in a few weeks ago was a speed workout where there was an acceleration element to it. So the total time he took for that 10,000 on the track, outdoor track by the way, mustn't be taken too seriously. There's that men's pack on the uphill slope now. The shadows shortening as the sun rises higher in the sky, and the temperature will climb. And well past halfway now. Many of these athletes will just be beginning to feel more and more uncomfortable. They say in a marathon, if you get to about 30k or 20 miles feeling uncomfortable, you're going to be in real trouble. In fact, they say in a marathon that 20 miles of the 26 is halfway, effectively, in terms of physical and mental effort. And I wonder if there is some sort of a marker in 35-kilometer walking where you could say the same thing, Mara.
Absolutely, but this is all to be learned, you know. So 35k has been raced before, but it's now a championship event, and these are all things which will become apparent in the next year or two, you know, where the racing really starts and where the fatigue sets in and so on. So really exciting to have a completely new event. It's really interesting seeing the 20k athletes stepping up, and we saw yesterday slightly depleted women's 20k field, partly because several of those athletes have stepped up to today's race. Glenda Morejon, for example, Ecuador with a very rich tradition, of course. Jefferson Perez, an icon from the past.
Well, the men have gone through 20k now, and having gone through 19k in 1:31.18. In fact, 20k, excuse me, that's the 20k time, 1:31.18. We're just looking for a time now of perhaps something just inside 2:40, Mara. Probably around 2:39, the likely finishing time, although if there is an acceleration in the last few kilometres, they might start pushing down into the mid-2:30s.
Yeah, that would be consistent with the times we were seeing yesterday, just a few minutes outside the best times for those athletes, given the gradient of the course and the tough conditions. So the men so far, we have Nathaniel Seiler on one red card for loss of contact, and the previous red cards we spoke about, Mark Tour for Bentley and Amoris Carua of Ecuador on one for loss of contact. So very good performance so far from the men with very few red cards in this lead group. Oyala, Alexi Oyala, also Finland, on one for loss of contact.
Well, these men are well past halfway now. They've gone through 20 kilometres of the 35 full distance, so the second act about to unfold. The women too are around halfway. Let's just have a look at some of the form we've seen so far. Well, Lee here at 19 kilometres has a lead of 26 seconds over Morejon of Ecuador. Ziblo of Poland back in third place now, and then quite a big gap behind that leading three to Paola Perez of Ecuador. She's a further 30 seconds back. But there has been a significant dropout, Mara, and by the Portuguese legend, Inês Enriquez.
Yes, there she is, 41 years old, the European and former world champion at 50k, and she has been one of the key figures pushing for the women to have 50k, so looks like she might have an injury, or perhaps suffering in the hot weather.
Yeah, she's clearly in a bad way. 41 years old. Old Father Time catches up with the best of us. She has put in an astonishing shift in those Portuguese colours. As you said quite rightly, Enriquez, European champion back in 2018. She is effectively the reigning European champion at 50 kilometres. And world champion at 50 kilometres back in London 2017. What a championships those were in the English capital. But Lee moving so well. There's a fabulous rhythm and cadence here. Good stride length too. Look at that side-on shot. She's maintaining a fabulous length of stride as she negotiates that turn at the bottom end of the course. And she will be getting plenty of information, lots of feedback about the effect this tempo is having on those behind her, and she'll be delighted to hear that she's got a lead of almost half a minute. Interesting thing, Mara, is that the second and third ranked Chinese are in 9th and 11th at 19 kilometres. Ma Feiying and Bai Weijing in 9th and 11th respectively, well over 3 minutes behind their teammate. Not the teamwork almost that we've seen in the races yesterday.
No, we're seeing the first chink in the Chinese armour, but China still through 12. China still on top in the team standings.
Well, let's take a look at the team standings at 19 kilometres. Ecuador on 11, well ahead of China. Yes, the second and third ranked Chinese athletes suffering somewhat mid-race. And the Ecuadorians building a significant lead in the team race. Plenty of drama to unfold, I'm sure, yet in Muscat. But at the moment, Ecuador have one hand on the team goal, and that would break the monopoly that the Chinese have maintained so far at these championships. And in spectacular style too. Ecuador packing so well. She's gone through 20k now as Lee in 1:37 exactly.
So a moment ago, Morecon, the Ecuadorian, was closing on the Polish athlete and may well be in second. In fact, she is in second through 20k. Glenda Morecon of Ecuador up into second place, some 26 seconds behind Lee, and the Polish athlete another 10 seconds adrift. So Glenda Morecon continuing the fabulous tradition from Ecuador. Lee really working hard on that uphill section up to the top turnaround point.
Omar, I'm just checking some figures here, and I've looked at Lee's first 10 kilometres. She went through 10k in 49:51, almost 50 minutes. She's gone through 20k in 1:37. So her second 10k has been about 2 3/4 minutes quicker than her first 10k. I mean, there's a distinct, such a significant acceleration there from Lee. Then you feel as though she must have been instructed as to how to unravel those two 10k segments. That's a monstrous acceleration through the second 10-kilometre segment from the current leader, Li Maokuo of China.
Well, that's where she did the work to close that gap on Priyanka. So she really worked hard in that second 20k. 26
seconds lead over Mojon, and a further 10 seconds back to Ziblo at 20k in the women's contest. Well past halfway, Perez and Yaramillo in the Ecuadorian colours. A further 1 minute 14 back from the leader, but from Ziblo they're about 42 seconds behind here. The athlete in bronze medal position is working fantastically, still has that Mona Lisa facial expression, I want to call it, a sort of semi-smile is clearly where she feels, the way she feels most relaxed. The Pole.
So Zeblo still going very well despite being caught by Morejón. A bit of a smile on her face there. So Priyanka, the early leader, now down in 8th place. I said a moment ago the second 20k for Lee. I did mean, of course, the second 10k was where she caught up on the early leader, Priyanka. So Zeblo from Poland currently in 3rd place. In 4th, Paulo Perez of Ecuador. 5th, Jaramillo of Ecuador. 6th is Garcia Carro, Laura Garcia Carro of Spain.
There is the form of Zeblo from behind, 3 times an Olympian, but Zeblo going well. 3 times Polish champion and the Polish record holder, and having a really good day so far. It's been a nice measured performance from the Cartagena Zeblo.
And that is Morejón of Ecuador with her coach Andres Chocho out on the course as well in the men's race, having a fabulous race up into 2nd place now. She won the La Coruña 20k in 2019 on her debut with a fabulous time, defeating a world-class field. She's really fearless, Morejón. So great to see her in her debut at 35k. Really going for it. Quite a big gap there on the Polish athlete. Through 20k it was 10 seconds, but looks like that gap is growing all the time now.
She is motoring, isn't she, Morejón? She was 2017 World Youth Champion at 5,000, so we know she's got great speed. And she's the fastest ever South American woman at 20k. Here's the current leader, Lee Marquardt. And she will be getting plenty of feedback. She can gauge her effort now according to what her pursuers are doing. That's a surge we've seen from Morejón that has carried her into 2nd place past Zeblo of Poland. That information will get to this Chinese leader. There's no doubt about that. They will be very, very keen to keep her updated with what's going on behind, because it's a team effort. It's not just the athletes, it's about the coaches and the team management who will bathe in the glory of this incredible 2 days of racing from the Chinese athletes already. They had a fabulous first day, and at the moment it looks like their 2nd day is going to plan, mostly.
I think Morejón may well be catching Lee. As soon as we have more splits, we'll bring them to you. But Lee just overtook one of the Japanese athletes, Katsuki, there in the men's race. He's no slouch, the Asian champion from 2018. He actually served a penalty in that 50k race, but still managed to win. So serving a penalty isn't necessarily the end of medals.
Well, there's only 18 seconds between the leader, Lee of China, and Morejón of Ecuador. She is closing. You're dead right, Mari Yamauchi, that gap is closing, and Zeblo is what's a further 19 seconds back behind the Ecuadorian in 3rd place, so well over half a minute, of course, behind the leader. But I'm not sure if that is a combination of a slight slowing from the leader, Lee, as well as an acceleration from Morejón here, or if it is just down to Morejón moving so fast, making sure she's got plenty of cold liquids all over her, and putting that little scarf soaked in ice cold water around her neck.
So Morejón closing fast. She was 26 seconds behind and now 18 seconds behind through 21k.
There you can see the gap. That's the Chinese leader, Lee Marquardt, to the left of picture, top left of picture, just going out of shot, and Morejón chasing very hard indeed. And she's got a target now, almost like a target on the back of the Chinese athlete.
And on the left of the screen there, Wu and Na, the Chinese athletes, looking like they're really struggling.
Aren't they?
Not a good day for China further down the field at the moment.
Yeah, I would say, looking at the form of these two Chinese, and you're dead right, Mar, they are really struggling. The cadence has gone. They're moving much, much slower than Lee or Morejón. And that is not good news for the Chinese in the team competition. Sticking together and gutting it out. 1:44 on the clock. We're expecting a winning time of somewhere just outside 2:50, I suppose. So they've got another hour and more to go.
So Na was down in 30th place a couple of kilometers ago.
Lee here will be aware that her lead is diminishing. The good news for her is that the fourth place athlete of Ecuador, Paula Perez, at 21k was 1 minute 21 behind her. In fact, almost a minute gap between third and fourth at the moment.
So all change in the men's race. Oyala of Finland is in the lead. He's on 1 red card for loss of contact. Through 23k he had a lead of 7 seconds on that chasing pack.
Well, what a turn up, quite a change in this men's race. The Finn, Alexi Oyala, he's the only Finnish athlete here, the 29-year-old. He's a 2:34 performer at his best. That puts him just outside the top 10 for this year, but it was last year he produced that time. He was 13th in the World Championships back in 2017 at 50k. We know he's got great strength. Disqualified from this event in 2018 and actually didn't finish the European Championships in 50k in 2018 either. But he's not the smoothest of walkers, is he? But good stride length. He's covering the ground well, but just doesn't have that sort of rhythm and smoothness that we see from so many of the Chinese walkers, for example. 7-second lead at 23k for Oyala, Alexi Oyala.
Now, in that chase group, only 2 Chinese athletes. Let's just check on
2 Germans, 2 Spanish. It's going to be tight for the team race.
So the third Chinese athlete was down in 14th place, closely followed by the 4th in 15th.
So Oyala, well, his current pace would take him to a time of 2:39. That's 4:33 per kilometre. His personal best pace, almost 10 seconds quicker per kilometre, would be 2:34. So at the moment, the winning time would, if Oyala were to stay at the front and maintain this same average tempo, would be just inside 2:40. And when you think that the world best is down in the 2:27s, it does give you an indication of how the conditions and indeed the way they set out their stall, this men's field, is making them well over 10 minutes slower than the world best.
And Finland, of course, won a fabulous bronze medal in the women's under-20 race, the very first race with Heta Veikola. So Finland, one of the very few countries who've been able to challenge the Chinese so far.
This is some walk from Oyala. He was only 38th in Sapporo last year in the Olympic 50k, having been disqualified in Rio 5 years previously. But like so many of these walkers, he gets wonderful advice from his coach Reima Salonen, who was the European champion back in 1982 in Athens over 50k. And that was a tough week too. I competed in Athens in 82. It was a very warm week in the Greek capital. Had a fair bit of rain too, but that just made it all the more humid.
And we've got a couple more red cards, Tim, in the men's race. So Christopher Linker, the German, on 1 card for bent knee, and Evan Dunphy as well at the back of that group. He's on 1 red card for loss of contact. And the others in that group who we previously saw had red cards were Mark Tour, Amores Carua of Ecuador, Nathaniel Seiler of Germany, and the leader Oyala of Finland. But everybody else currently on 0 red cards in that lead group.
Well, this acceleration from Alexi Oyala, top left of picture, he's got, what, about 40 metres on the pack that is still very tightly bunched, is certainly going to start breaking up the pack. There's no doubt about it. Almost 2 abreast now. In fact, the two Germans there to the right of picture in their yellow caps, side by side, working together. And it is the Spanish athletes at the front there, Lopez and Martin, two of the pre-race favourites who are, and Tour is there as well. Remember, although he's got a warning, he's got a red card against his name. The Spanish bunching really well, and I'd like to see the team race, but I suspect the Spanish in the lead at the moment, Mara, with 3 up in the top 6 or 8.
Yeah, so the last team standings we have were Germany, Spain and China, but still very similar scores.
The German pairing there, bottom right of screen in the yellow caps, just beginning to lose a bit of ground on that pack. I think they're suffering. Linke and Hilbert working together to try and hang on to the coattails of the pack, which in turn is trying to hang on to this gentleman. And what a race he is having. Alexi Oyala. Looks cool, doesn't he, too? Not really sweating up. He looks very, very calm and in control. Second in the European Team Championships 50k last year. Setting a personal best there of 3:46, and as would seem he's carrying that purple patch into 2022.
And through 24k, the 3 Spaniards were within the top 5 in the men's race. 6th place, one of the Chinese athletes, Gao. So still very much China, Spain and Germany. If there's a tie in the team competition, then the place of the last scoring athlete, the 3rd athlete of the team, determines the result. So every position counts in this team competition.
I think that gap is closing a little bit between Oyala and the pack behind him. It was 40 or 50 metres a couple of minutes ago, and that is now probably, what, about 20 metres? Yeah, I think the Spanish are working really hard to try and get back to the fin.
So meanwhile in the women's race, Glenda Morecon closing fast on Lee through 23k. The gap was only 7 seconds. So the 21-year-old Ecuadorian having a fabulous race. And there she is exchanging her ice necklace, grabbing plenty of water from the personal refreshment station there. The team officials from each team hand out the refreshments to the athletes there. And then they also have a general table where they can just get water and sponges. So Morecon having a fabulous race so far.
Isn't she just? Getting plenty of liquid on board. So important. Take it on when you feel thirsty, and it's too late, they say. You should be getting liquid in a little and often. But wow, is she powering up?
She's closing fast, and she's going much better than Lee, I would say. Meanwhile, in 3rd is the Polish athlete Zeblo. Of course, Poland won the gold medal in the men's 50k at the Olympics last year. So Poland, another very strong country in race walking. And meanwhile, the Spaniard Laura Garcia Carro is up into 4th place. So she's having a terrific race moving through the field. She's some 1 minute 28 adrift of the leader.
23 kilometres. The time for Lee, 1:51.26, and you can see the chaser, Glenda Morecon, is right on her tail. 7 seconds the gap at 23 kilometres, and there's no doubt that the Ecuadorian is going to be right up alongside the Chinese, who has led for, what, about the last 40 minutes or so, maybe more, with the Zeblo some 41 seconds back at 23k. She looks powerful, doesn't she? She's moving so well as the Ecuadorian.
Here we have Garcia Carro of Spain moving through the field beautifully. She's very much up for this new 35k event, so can she get into the medals? The gap between her and the Polish athlete about 40 odd seconds through 23k.
Well, there's the splits at 23 kilometers. That 7-second gap between Lee and the Ecuadorian Mojon, and Zeblo, what, 41 seconds further back. And you can see bottom center of screen, she is about to catch Lee. Mojon has a much quicker leg turnover, doesn't have the same length of stride as the Chinese, doesn't drive through the stride phase. She cuts her stride a little bit and not using her hips as much. But look at this, the moment, the passing moment here in Muscat. The Chinese athlete Lee looking a little awkward compared with the fluency of the Ecuadorian style. She's in the slipstream of the Chinese. And the good thing for Mojon here, Mara, is that she can study the style of the Chinese, take some information on board, just psychologically get that little advantage and figure out, as they lap the second and third scorers for China there, she can decide when to make her move. Is she having a little breather here, or has Lee actually upped her game? Lee Manquo upped her game.
Now, this is interesting. What does Morejon do in this situation? Do you just you know, use the athlete you've caught as a pacemaker, or power past, or give yourself a little break and then power past? But she's just taking her time. Still over 10k to go, some 12k or so to go. But Lee responding. I just wondered a moment ago if Lee wasn't holding her leg, but she, of the two, the Ecuadorian certainly looks stronger, much shorter stride.
I was going to say, what a contrast in styles. You can see the Chinese athlete Lee with that slight forward lean of the torso, the hips slightly leaning forward, and a long raking stride compared with the pitter-patter, much shorter stride form of the Ecuadorian Mojon. But she glances across there at the Chinese, almost as if to check out her form, but she looks calm, doesn't she? She looks confident and strong. Shorter
stride, but a very high cadence, and I just wonder if she might fatigue a little in the latter stages. This is her debut over 35k, but she's done some sensational debuts in the past, La Coruña, as we mentioned before, and she's been on podiums before, so she's really fearless and still only 21 years old. She used to train in bare feet when she was younger, so I'm sure her coach Andres Chocha will be keeping a close eye. But Morejon now into the lead, and Ecuador having a fabulous race, very much in control. 4 athletes in the top 7 to 23k.
Well, she watched Lee from behind for a couple of minutes, just sized up the Chinese athlete and then made her move. Now, they do say in racing, if you're going to go past somebody, make it look impressive. Give them a psychological slap in the face, so to speak. Make them think you feel great and you're feeling much better than them. And she's done that. She's gone past the Chinese and really turning on it, pushing hard. A big sigh there, an extra large breath for Morejon to try and maintain this surge. And I do think that Lee has raised her game. In the background there, I think she's trying desperately to hang on to the Ecuadorian, but surely it's only a matter of time before that gap opens up. It's what, 3 or 4 meters at the moment. Let's see how it goes. 1:58 on the clock. We're approaching the 2-hour mark.
And Lee now moving in behind Morejon. I was going to say Morejon did the right thing to not be right in front of Lee, but Lee now following her. So Lee really trying to hang on there. And meanwhile, the Polish athlete still in third, but Laura Garcia Carro of Spain moving up. She's currently in fourth, but I think she's closing on third. So lots of change in the finishing order in this women's race. All of them, the Polish athlete on 1 red card, but all the others on 0.
Well, it's in this 25th kilometre that Morejon has taken the lead, but Lee responds. The heavyweights battling it out. That is an incredible response from the Chinese athlete. Almost indignant at the Ecuadorian moving alongside her and then past her. And Morejon with that much quicker leg turnover to the right of picture just eases into the lead again. The Chinese went for the drink station. Morejon eschewed that opportunity. And that gave her an extra 3 or 4 meters. She moves across the road now, and the Chinese tucked in her slipstream and following her, almost shadowing her. Doesn't want to be in the view of Morejon.
Yeah, Lee's doing exactly the right thing in this situation. When you get caught, and of course it's a bit of a nasty surprise, but the thing to do is just hang in there. Use the athlete who's overtaking you just to get through that bad patch and see if you can't, you know, recover a little, get a second wind. Just don't let them go past you and get a gap.
Well, Morejon's style is more susceptible to lifting when she gets very tired in the latter stages if she's under pressure there. I think that's why she would like to get a gap now, so that she can not be under too much pressure on the last lap or two as we go back to this men's race. And again, there's been further movement, and it's the Swede who is looking strong now. Carlstrom taking in plenty of air there, the bronze medalist over 20 kilometers at the World Championships in Doha. Both his parents were top walkers, you mentioned that earlier, Mara. So loads of experience and encouragement from them. And we are down to single file. And that men's pack, you know, it stayed at 14 or 15 strong for many, many kilometers through the middle of the race. Now it's broken down. And we had the challenge from the Finnish athlete Alexi Oyala. But now it's Carlstrom, and the Scandinavians giving a wonderful account of themselves in the latter stages of this men's 35k battle.
Yeah, Carlstrom really pushing on. Be interesting to see the next splits when they come up, but Martin, the Spaniard, just hanging in there. So through 26k we had, my computer's telling me Mark Tour was in second, but that's definitely Martin following Carlstrom. And
I'll tell you what, Martin looks very calm indeed, doesn't he? I just get the impression he's biding his time. Alvaro Martin, the European champion, reigning European champion at 20k from Berlin 2018. Second in the Spanish 35k championship back in January. Carlstrom here. And none of these athletes walking to particularly fast times on the day. This is all about competition, man against man, woman against woman. Liu back in third place for China. Liu Ning having a good contest. He was only fourth in the Chinese trial race to make this team, but he's the best of the Chinese at the moment. Linker back down the field, the tall German having to let the leaders go. And is this a move from Martin up alongside Carlstrom? No, just side by side. And getting water, and you can see there Martin threw his white cap aside, was given the water bottle, and the cap was wrapped around it. He puts on a new cold cap. That is something that actually came to the fore in the marathon at the Rio Olympic Games. I think it was Galen Rupp who was changing his cap at every personal drink station every 5k, and I remember distinctly at the time many in the media community going, what on earth is going on? Is this a drink station or equipment station? And I think a lot of people are questioning the ethics of it, but it's become the norm now.
yeah, you can have anything you want on your personal refreshment station within reason. You can see the Japanese athletes with a sort of collar there, an ice collar. We saw them using those in Doha. Some of the German athletes in Doha had tall hats which they were putting bags of ice into. So anything you can use which will keep you cool. And Carlstrom there with his ice collar. Whatever works, you've just got to use. And both of them there, you can see they've got chest straps on, which must be heart rate monitors. So really closely measuring their effort, which is very sensible on a hot day like this.
Well, at 27 kilometers, Carlstrom and Martin were together. Lou has dropped back a little bit since that clocking, but 6 seconds further back. Tour and Lopez putting Spain in a really strong position. 3 in the top 5 with Kawano up alongside them, and Takahashi too going well, a further 6 seconds behind that first chase group. Evan Dunphy having a good day as well, the Canadian, 3 seconds behind Takahashi. So he's rallied, Dunphy. I thought he looked like he was suffering a little bit at the back of the group about 20 minutes ago, but he's up there in the top 7 or 8. Carlstrom, by the way, big fella, isn't he? Really broad across the shoulders. His father, Enrique Vera of Mexico, was a World Championship silver medalist over 50k back in 1976. That was when there was a World Championship in the walks, but not in track and field athletics, yet stadium athletics. Remember, the inaugural World Championships in a stadium for athletics was in 1983 in Helsinki.
So Carlstrom has been a 20k specialist, but moving up brilliantly so far to the 35k. He did contract COVID over Christmas and missed a few weeks of training. When I spoke to Laura Garcia Carro of Spain, she seemed to be convinced that the 35k would favour the 20k athletes, and her compatriot Maria Perez, who's not here this time, but she did a brilliant fast time earlier this year, stepping up from the 20k.
Well, we're well inside the last 10k now. In fact, around 7.5k for these men to come. And the gaps have opened up very quickly in the last 15 minutes or so. And it is Martin who's got the bull by the horns. The Spaniard Alvaro Martin, a metre ahead of Carlstrom now. It's about the first time he's had his nose in front the entire race. Only second in the Spanish 35k championship, behind his compatriot Miguel Angel Lopez, who has moved into 3rd place at 28 kilometers.
And at the back of that group, the Japanese athlete Kawano, Masatora Kawano, he now has 1 red card for bent knee. Looks like he's got ice something or others in his hands as well. But very smooth technique, but he is on 1 red card, as is Mark Tour ahead of him. Bumped into 4th place at the last minute in the Olympics 50k last summer. And that is Ning Lu, the Chinese athlete.
Yes, he's the best positioned of the Chinese athletes, is Lu. And his current pace, 4:31 per kilometre. That would bring him home. Well, that's 2:37 pace, but actually he's not heading for anything like that. That's just the pace he's moving at now. And we are at the business end of this race now. Acceleration's going in from all these athletes. The work rate is up. It's a bit like being on the last lap of a 1 mile race, maybe a four lap race on the track. You psychologically can feel the finish beckoning you, and you can up your work rate. Carlstrom putting up a fabulous battle here against Martin, who was in the lead, now drops back into 2nd place once more. Carlstrom very, very reluctant to let the Spaniard
from lead
dominate.
From
I wonder, Maura, if you get into the front, does it give you that boost psychologically, even if it's only a 1 metre lead, that you are in control? And that's why they're wrestling for this lead, even by a metre or so.
Yeah, I mean, you can control it up at the front, but of course there are advantages to being behind as well. You know, you can just let the person in front do the hard work with the pacing and save yourself behind. So Morejon in the lead.
Morejon in the lead, and has a big lead too. 2:05.44 at 26 kilometers, 9k to go at that point. Now actually more like 8k, and a gap at that point was only 1 second, but look how it's opened up behind her. You can see Lee Malquo in 2nd place there, up against the rails, walking the shorter line as Juarez is passed by Morejon the Spanish athlete. But the gap is probably, what, about 6 or 7 seconds now. So it has certainly opened up significantly in the last 3 minutes.
And she's certainly looking strong. We talked earlier about where the quote-unquote halfway point is, and I'm just wondering if 25k in this new 35k is where the racing really begins, because Morejon now through 26k really piling on the pressure. She doesn't look tired at all.
You can see the men's leaders in the background too. They're Martin and Carlstrom, just beginning to close on Morejon here. That is of little concern to her. This is her race, and it's going supremely well at the moment. Lee Marquot has the strength, we know, over 50k to maintain the pressure from behind, and Morejon will know that. She'll know about her competitors. She is going supremely well in this 35-kilometer debut. It's taken to it like a duck to water, hasn't she?
Certainly has. Lee still looking reasonably okay. So Lee trying to hang in there for second place. She's got a big lead on third. The Polish athlete some 51 seconds or so behind. So Lee just needs to keep it together now. But Ecuador very much in control of the team event.
Well, there's the split at 27 kilometers. Morejon 12 seconds ahead of Lee. I don't think the gap is quite as big as that at the moment. It might be that Lee is coming back at her. But what is impressive, most impressive to me, Mara, is the cadence of Morejon here, the Ecuadorian. I mean, it is a pitter-patter, shorter stride than the Chinese employ, but boy, does she have enormous speed.
Yeah, quite a chopped stride, not a nice long flowing stride like Lee, but very fast cadence. And through 27k now, so
you can see the leading men in the background, or Martin nearest the camera rather, Carlstrom on the far side, who is actually coached by Rob Heffernan, Irishman of one of the great walkers of years gone by, and Morejon just a right of picture, watching them ease away from her. Matters not, she's going faster than anybody else. She keeps putting ice down her bottoms to keep body temperature down. Everything you can do to cool the blood, to keep the core temperature down just a little bit, will lead to a better performance. Plenty of liquids being taken on board by these athletes, because now the temperature is climbing, there's no doubt about that. It's 9:15 in the morning in Muscat, and the temperature, well, it's about 29, pushing 30 degrees. It has climbed significantly in the last hour. Lee there on the downslope towards the turn at the bottom. Powerless at the moment to stop Morejon from this very, very quick tempo that's keeping her in the lead. And just looking at the splits at 27k, she had a 12-second lead there. There was, well, what, about a 51-second lead behind Lee to Ziblo of Poland, who herself then had 34 seconds back to Garcia Carro of Spain in fourth. So Ziblo at the moment, the Pole, still walking wonderfully, possibly towards a medal.
Yeah, but Garcia Carro is closing that gap now some 34 seconds. I think she had 40-odd seconds before. So is there enough time left in the race for Garcia Carro to catch the Polish athlete? But meanwhile, up at the front, you can see in that shot there, Morejon having a fabulous debut over 35k. Still only 21 years old.
Yeah, Morejon there has negotiated that turn, and actually I think that gap might have grown a little bit. It was 12 seconds when there was 2 hours 10 minutes on the clock. That was some 4.5 minutes or so ago. And Morejon, is she heading for Ecuadorian gold here? to break the streak of gold medal performances that the Chinese produced on the first day yesterday in the 2 under 20 10k races and in the women's 20k. The men's 20k, of course, coming up today on this second day, will close proceedings in Muscat. It's at 4 p.m. Goodness knows what the temperature is going to be by that time.
So Morejon through 26k had a lead of just 1 second over Lee, but now 12 seconds. So Morejon going away all the time.
Lee, who put in a massive acceleration to catch the early leader in this race. Remember, it was the Indian Priyanka Goswami who led for the first third or so of this race. Well, the men at 30 kilometers with Alvaro Martin on 2:14 has built up a bit of a lead, and it's an impressive walk this from Martin. Comes from the south of Spain, Extremadura, is used to very warm temperatures, therefore maybe with the temperature climbing, entering his territory. In fact, just checking, the computer has updated the situation. Carlstrom and Martin together on 2:14.55 at 30k. And that means they're heading for a time, Mara, of what, about 2:36, something like that?
Yes, that sounds about right, which is about what we would expect. The world leads in the men's 35k, 2:27, 2:29, and given the conditions and the tough course, we would expect them to finish a little outside that.
Well, we can take a look at these splits at 30 kilometers as this men's 35k race reaches its climax. The battle between Carlstrom of Sweden and Alvaro Martin of Spain is truly absorbing, and there it is at 35k. This pair battling away have a 13-second lead over Liu of China, who's a further 13 seconds ahead of Lopez and Kawano of Spain and Japan respectively. Dunphy up into 6th place, is going really well. Tour in 7th for Spain, Takahashi in 8th for Japan. But the form of these two, when the pressure is on, is what can make all the differences. I'm told by specialists in the walking community that it's when you're under real pressure that mistakes can occur, that your form starts going and you get penalties. So let's have a look at the form of these lead athletes. Well, with 2 hours 18 minutes on the clock, we're coming to the really decisive moments in these 35k races for men and women at this World Athletics World Team Walking Championships. And here is the women's leader coming towards us now, and an athlete who has built up a useful lead in the latter stages. It's been a perfectly judged effort so far by Glenda Morejon of Ecuador. 2:15.09 at 28 kilometers for her. She has a 14-second lead over Lee, and Mara Yamauchi, that has grown slightly by a couple of seconds over the last kilometer.
Yeah, she's moving away from Lee, not that quickly, but I think she's going better than Lee. So Lee really needs to go up a few gears if she's going to close that gap.
We're going back to the men because they are significantly closer to the climax of their race. But here are the two leaders, absolutely locked together. Wearing 326, Alvaro Martin of Spain. Wearing 375 in that yellow strip of Sweden is Percy Carlstrom. Both fabulous walkers, over 20k and 50k, both used to taking medals in major championships. Martin, in that white cap, is the reigning European champion at 20k. And on paper, a couple of minutes quicker than Carlstrom. And Martin does have that great form from the second place in the Spanish 35k earlier on this year. I wonder if that is still in his legs to some degree. I guess not, although Mara 35k is not exactly a short sprint. It's longer, let's say, in running terms than a half marathon. Might not be as draining as a marathon.
Yeah, and certainly much quicker recovery than from the 50k. It was interesting that the Spanish head coach seemed to think that, a busy schedule isn't nearly as much trouble as some of the other athletes have been saying. There have been a few big hitters absent from these championships because there's a very busy summer coming up, but not for Spain. They've fielded pretty much their best athletes. Maria Perez absent, but otherwise all the top Spanish athletes are here.
Well, Lou is in third place in the men's race. 30 seconds down at 31 kilometers. Just a gap of 13 seconds behind him, though, to Miguel Angel Lopez of Spain, the second Spanish athlete. They have the lead being battled out for them by Alvaro Martin with Carlstrom. Then it is Lu Ning of China in third, Lopez in fourth. Kawano is right up alongside Lopez as well. Here are the two leaders, and we do expect real fireworks in these last few kilometers between this pairing. Place your bets, folks, because Carlstrom has tried so hard to rid himself of Martin and has been the man who has led for most of the time, but only by half a meter or a meter or so. Martin, for my money, has probably looked the coolest, the most relaxed and in control. When we do get close-ups of his face and shoulders, he looks very, very calm. Is he biding his time, the Spaniard in the white cap?
Yeah. We need to keep an eye a little further down the field because Evan Dunphy is in sixth. He has a very fast finish. He pipped Mark Tour for the bronze medal at the Olympics last year. Meanwhile, Junghans of Germany, Karl Junghans, he's moving up into seventh place, as is Chao Bonfim of Brazil, and the gaps aren't that big. So third place Lou, 30 seconds behind the two leaders. That is quite a big gap, but thereafter only 13 seconds back to Miguel Lopez of Spain, along with Kawano, and then another 14 seconds to Dunphy.
He's a huge fella, Carlstrom, isn't he? Really powerful in the shoulders, noticeably bigger than Alvaro Martin, and trying to keep the pressure on the Spaniard here. Jiaqi of China, Yang Ben, and just looking where he is, he's
down in 12th place. Interesting to see him wearing arm warmers. I don't know if that is some sort of something to cool him down, possibly.
He's 2 minutes down. You can see the leaders on the left-hand side there, the yellow vest of Carlstrom with Martin up against the side of the road on the upslope here. They have gone through 31 kilometers. The gap back to Lou between this pair and the third place was 30 seconds. Lou of China at the moment with a 13-second cushion behind him to Lopez of Spain and Kawano of Japan. But Martin just beginning to sweat up visibly, for my money, for about the first time in the race. Still looks calm, doesn't he? But there, a little grimace, telling grimace from Martin, because he's under assault here from the Swede Percy Carlstrom, who has maintained the pressure unrelentingly on the Spaniard, who's pushing on now. His personal best is his season's best. 2:29.59 makes him the third fastest in the world this year. Almost gets him in the all-time top 10. But there is a gap, and Carlstrom has the gap, and that will give him extra reinforcement. When you get a gap like that and you've been working so hard, whether it's a cross-country race, a road race, walking, running, it doesn't matter. The fact is, if you've been pummeling away at an opponent, trying desperately to get a gap for a long, long time, and eventually you get it, the adrenaline flows. Now, they were together at 32 kilometers with 47 seconds back to Lou. That gap has grown significantly. Lopez and Carro closing on Lou. There's going to be a battle royal for that bronze medal. Dunphy, well, he's 15 seconds behind Lopez and Carro. Don't discount him just yet. But the significant race up at the front for the gold is that Carlstrom gets reward at last. And Alvaro Martin having to let him go. I don't know if you'd call that throwing in the towel, Mara, because he's trying desperately to go with Carlstrom. But we saw a very telling grimace from the Spaniard couple of minutes ago, and that gap is opening up incredibly fast now.
Yeah, definitely moving away, but Carlstrom has form with winning. He's a good tactician, won the European Team Championships 20k last year, won the European Cup at 20k in 2019. And of course the bronze medal in Doha at the World Championships. 6th this year in the Spanish 20 kilometers. So Carlstrom now into the final 3k and looking very comfortable. As you said, quite strong upper body. We do see that a lot in the race walkers compared to the distance runners. Good dynamic arm action helps them really use their hips to get a good technique.
Ollie makes this turnaround. Carlstrom, there is Martin, who has definitely had to ease back on the throttle. Carlstrom way ahead on the right there, just appears from behind that clock in the yellow vest of Sweden. Martin takes that turn and he's probably, 12-15 seconds down, and that has opened up, Mara, literally in about 3 or 4 minutes. Carlstrom here, I don't know, he must have seen at the turnaround, I suppose, the gap between himself and Martin, and he'll have taken a lot of reinforcement at seeing that gap, because surely now, as he's about to enter the final circuit, when he goes through the finish line in a minute, he'll have 2k to go. And we will hear the bell, of course, for Percy Carlstrom, the 31-year-old Swede. Here it is, the most glorious sound for any walker in a long-distance race. And looks at his watch, checks it there with 2k to go, and Martin is losing ground with every stride.
Yeah, and Carlstrom looks comfortable, really powering away from Martin. So barring disaster for Carlstrom, I think he's got this sewn up. He's on 0 red cards, as is Martin.
How ironic, a Scandinavian athlete in 30-degree heat, powering away from the rest of the world. And he's worked for this too, fully deserved. He has persevered for kilometre after kilometre in this second half of the race. And to break an athlete of the calibre of the reigning European champion at 20k does underline the quality of this performance from Carlstrom. The cap comes off. Is he going to get a replacement? Throws that one aside. Yep. Lots of cool water. Gets a new cool cap. That is fabulous. Oh dear. Well, he's obviously in confident form. He must feel that the gold is within grasp. One hand perhaps on the gold medal as the Swede. That is something I've never seen before. Yeah, I've just been told through my headphones that maybe there's ice in those horns on that soft cap.
He had done this before. I think it was the European Team Championships back in 2019, I think. Possibly last year. Came down the finishing straight wearing, what do we call it, fancy dress?
That is called what you call an early celebration. Martin lapping Hilbert. Jonathan Hilbert, the Olympic silver medalist at 50k from last year. That is the quality of the walking over the last 45 minutes or so from this leading pair. They are lapping huge names in the sport of race walking, and they're on the downslope now for the final time. Current leader Percy Carlstrom with Alvaro Martin just about 20 seconds down. Carlstrom so confident he can put on that horned helmet to celebrate on this final circuit.
Bear in mind it is 30 degrees and it looks a bit warm, that Viking hat he's got on, but he's obviously very confident. Always makes me nervous when athletes celebrate early, but Carlstrom so far looking very comfortable, and he's just minutes away from wrapping up this title, barring any disaster. But is that Martin just behind him?
Yeah, but the foreshortening effect of the camera shot was very deceptive. He negotiates the turn at the northern end of the course, at the bottom of the hill, in effect, for the final time. He has about 1,200 meters to go, 3 laps of an athletics track as he powers up the hill. Martin will glance across and acknowledge the supremacy of this man on the day. And he's still working hard, he's still going strongly.
We were saying earlier you can have anything you want in your personal refreshments kit, and he's certainly taken advantage of that.
Well, I bet you it's not just a woolly cap he's wearing, it's a horned Viking helmet that, of course, resonates for so many of the Scandinavians to a wonderful history. Tough peoples who through thousands of years have built a genetic pool, who really have become very, very strong, conscientious, organised peoples. Scandinavian winters in hundreds of years gone by, if you weren't organised, if you weren't conscientious, if you weren't preparing for the winter ahead, well, you were a goner by about November. So these athletes from Scandinavia know how to prepare, they know how to be organised, but to be diligent. And clearly this athlete, Percy Carlstrom, has prepared wonderfully for this. I'm not sure where he's been doing any acclimatization training, Mara, but he has handled this heat. And as you said, it's 30 degrees centigrade through the last hour or so.
If you perform well like this, all you have to do next time you're in a hot country is repeat what you've done. It's incredible, it's brilliant learning. Through 33k, he had an 18-second gap on Martin, but meanwhile, Liu of China and Kawano of Japan are locked neck and neck in a battle for the bronze medal, some 1 minute 14 adrift of the leader Carlstrom. Kawano on 1 red card, Liu on 0, so that won't make much difference to their tactics. Liu now on 1 red card. So the battle for the bronze medal hotting up with 1 red card apiece, and there is Martin in the silver medal position.
Well, we can take a look at the team standings now as Carlstrom has gone through 34 kilometres. He's inside the last kilometre. Spain on 17, well ahead of China. The Chinese lose their monopoly of gold medal winning performances in the men's race on this second day over 35 kilometres. And there's the sight of Carlstrom that the entire men's field have in effect had to put up with. It's been a supreme performance from him. He's utilised the full distance. He's the one that's done the attacking, the aggressive walking through the second half of this race. He has to go through this gantry up to the far end of the course, make the final turn, and then enter the finishing straight.
Barring any accidents, he will be there. He's coming in front of our
suffering, there's no doubt about it. Carlstrom went through 34k and 2:31.48, as you said, Mara. At 33k, the gap was 18 seconds. I rather fancy it will have grown significantly, because Carlstrom has got the adrenaline pumping through his veins now. He knows he's going to be crowned world champion.
Yeah, he's just got one more turn to go, and then he'll be into the finishing straight. We haven't got a split yet for Martin through 34k. I think Carlstrom is going away from him all the time. So fantastic racing from Carlstrom. Just a reminder that the chief judge can disqualify an athlete in the very final stages, even if they've got no red cards, as is the case with Carlstrom, but barring any extravagant rule-breaking celebrations, I think that's very unlikely. So Carlstrom approaches the final turn, and he will be able to see the Finnish gantry with victory in sight.
And nobody in sight yet amongst his pursuers. Martin was 18 seconds down at 34k. We still don't have a 34k time for the Spaniard in second place. He's breathing hard now. He's covered his 34th kilometre in 4:11. Has Percy Carlstrom. 2:35 on the clock. His personal best from last year, 2:31.54. The conditions accounting for much of that difference. So times not important on a day like this. Sweltering hot, a tough, challenging course with 17.5 laps. 17 times they've had to negotiate the climb up this road in Muscat. Good road surface, but the hill is what's made the real difference. And Carlstrom celebrates in special style as he comes towards the line. He is the world champion over 35 kilometres. It is gold for Sweden.
What a victory for Sweden.
And boy, oh boy, does this man know how to celebrate. Forget the Viking helmet, nearly lost his glasses there. The Swedish flag is handed back to him. And he is a very, very worthy champion. We all love to see a champion who has worked so hard in the latter stages of an endurance event and pushes on to victory, and that is just what he has done.
That looked like his mother.
Well, Martin has shed those glasses but waves that Spanish flag aloft as he crosses the line for the silver medal. Some way down, he put up such stout resistance, but about 3 or 4 kilometres before the finish had to ease back on the throttle as the pummeling from Carlstrom was irresistible.
And I think we've got a battle for the bronze medal hotting up. Carro and Lou were locked together, closely followed by Lopez, one of the Spanish athletes. So Martin thrilled with his second place there. And of course this is the inaugural, and there is Lopez. So Lopez caught the Japanese athlete, and Lou comes in for the bronze medal.
Miguel Lopez of Spain takes the bronze, and that augurs well for the Spanish in the team race. Lou coming through, pouring it on to try and stay clear of one of the Germans. Was that Linker or Hilbert in the background as Lou crosses the line in 4th place. 2:37.27 the time of Lopez in 3rd place, and Kawano in fact taking 4th. Great walking from the Japanese, missing out on the bronze by some 9 seconds, and Lou a little bit further back, another 15 seconds back.
So that was Junghans, the German, who was moving through the field. Brilliant finish from him, coming in 6th place, and Chao Bonfim also moving through the field. So the inaugural 35k, Carlstrom is the champion with a championship record, and Ning Lu down in 5th place, a national record for him.
I'm not sure if that's strictly true for Ning Lu, is it? No, it's can't be a national record. That's a wrong mark on our computer screens. As we can go back to this women's race though now, and it is the bell this time for what has been a supreme walk from the athlete surely who is heading for gold now. Glenda Estefania Morajon
through 31k, Tim, she had a lead of 55 seconds, so going away all the time from the Chinese athlete.
Well, it does look like the Chinese might have somebody on the podium in this women's race. No Chinese on the podium in that men's race. Carlstrom of Sweden taking gold. Martin of Spain with his teammate Lopez taking silver and bronze respectively. Kawano of Japan in fourth, with Liu, the best of the Chinese, in fifth. But Morejón here still going strongly, breathing hard. There has been very, very little let up in that cadence. The leg turnover rate is staggering. By far the quickest I think we've seen of the four races so far, 5 races so far.
Amazing, and she doesn't seem to be tiring at all. I thought with that incredibly fast cadence and the hilly course, the tough conditions, we might see her tiring in the final stages, but not a bit of it. And Lee in second, still going strong, nearly a minute or so behind Morejón, and the Polish Giblo still in third. Meanwhile, Laura Garcia Carro was moving down, was losing time on the pole. We thought she might overtake the pole, but meanwhile at the sharp end it's all about Morejón and Ecuador.
Well, and the Ecuadorians have been going so well. Morejón, the inspirational figure at the front end of the race. She is breathing hard though. She is beginning to suffer here now. I get the feeling that she on her final circuit is working much harder than was Carlstrom in his latter stages. 2:41 on the clock for Morejón, and we shouldn't forget, Mara, this is her debut at this distance.
Yep.
The Chinese have got times beside their names. They've been in this territory. For her, this is new stuff, a new feeling.
Yep, she's absolutely fearless, done some fantastic debuts.
Starts her final lap.
World under 20 best and area record on her 20k debut.
She will be getting plenty of information from the sidelines, and at 31 kilometers her lead, 55 seconds ahead of Lee Malkuo, and Ziblo of Poland a further 58 seconds back. So Ziblo herself in third ahead of Garcia Carro with 4k to go. Had about some 48 seconds on the Spaniard. The bronze medal not yet secure for the pole, but Morejón with nearly a minute back to Lee surely is good for gold.
Yep, and at 30k, positions 5th, 6th and 7th were Morejón's teammates from Ecuador, so brilliant team performance from them as they approach the finish.
Morejón on the upslope for the final time. And there is Lee on the left of shot, making an adjustment to that cap, but just trying to hang on to the silver medal position. I think she's fairly safe for it. She has nearly a minute between herself and Ziblo of Poland in third place. There is the Chinese. That is Lee in second place.
Morejón was the world youth champion over 5,000 meters in 2017, second in the World Team Championships junior race at the last edition of these championships in Taicang in 2018, third at the World Junior Championships, so lots of experience of medals and getting on the podium.
And just to underline what a global sport this is, we have a South American in the lead, a Chinese athlete, an Asian athlete in second place, and the Pole Ziblo goes past left of shot there in third place. A European in the bronze medal position. Garcia Carro is isolated in fourth place, but may well finish in that unenviable position as just beginning to come towards the top of this climb for the final time. Morejon of Ecuador has a comfortable lead, and she will be hearing that from the sidelines. She will know full well. And she's grimacing there and actually shrieking with the fatigue, I think I heard, is Morejon, because such is the extreme effort that has enabled her to break away from Lee of China and open up this gap of nearly a minute that she has pretty much entered the red zone for herself. But you can do that with about a kilometre to go. She knows she's just got 2.5 minutes or so of hard walking to come. Well, at 30, we're still waiting for our computer to update, but we know she's got a good lead.
So Lee in second place, looking very tired now, working up the steepest part of the incline. But I think she has second place wrapped up, barring any disasters.
What a contrast, Omar, between the style of the two and the power of Morejon as she negotiates this final lap with Lee, who was moving wonderfully earlier in the race. Lee's personal best 2:46.12, that earlier on this year in those Chinese trials in Nanjing. But she is surviving, I think, is the best way to describe that form. This is quite majestic form for Morejon of Ecuador. So powerful. There's been no let up. The arms working hard, the legs powering through.
She doesn't even look tired.
Well, we did hear some gasps from her a couple of minutes ago. The intensity of the effort. But this is some debut, isn't it? To walk to world gold. She's just got a few hundred meters to go. There's the finish line that she will cross when she negotiates the final turn, a few hundred meters ahead of her. And let's not forget how warm it is. 30 degrees plus now on the streets of Muscat. Checks her clock. She's been walking now for over 2 3/4 hours. The time relatively irrelevant when you're taking a medal. Who cares about the performance? However, it's the manner of the victory that has been most impressive. Totally dominant over this last half hour and more to break the best walkers in the world, and they don't come much better than the Chinese, who are wonderfully prepared, and we know that because of their performances in the under-20 races yesterday and the women's 20k yesterday afternoon, where they took individual golds and team golds right across the board. But it's been a very different story today, Mara, over 35k.
Yeah, Chinese winning 6 titles out of 6 yesterday, but not so great today. Lee still in the silver medal position, but Morejon now past the final turn into the finishing straight. What an amazing debut from this young Ecuadorian, only 21 years old. We've got a lot more to see from her in the coming years. Could she be the Olympic champion in Paris in 3 years' time?
Well, if she were to take Olympic gold in Paris, it would be some consolation for failing to finish in Sapporo last year at 20k. She's a world youth champion from 5 years ago, over 5,000 metres on the track. Well, today she's a senior champion over 35 kilometres, 7 times the distance. The roads of Muscat have been a happy hunting ground for the Ecuadorian in 2022. She is the world champion. She crosses the line, arms aloft, to take gold for Ecuador. South America will be celebrating. Ecuador will be celebrating in great style, I'm sure. That is the debut of debuts for Glenda Estefania Morejon. So take this 35-kilometre world title. And she's still in good form. Doesn't she look calm?
What a performance. Victory.
Absolutely brilliant.
A superb race.
Looks like she's waiting for her teammates who'll be through very soon. They were back in fifth, 6th, 7th.
Well, here is Lee in second place. Now, the last time we have for Lee is from the 31-kilometre splits. That was a long time ago, of course. We're just checking that the final kilometre splits have come through. No, the computers have gone on the blink at the moment, but it matters not a jot, because we know the champion, Morejon, and barring disaster, we know that the silver medalist will be Lee Marquardt of China, who has looked like she's really been suffering for this last 45 minutes or so. She has had to give best to the Ecuadorian, and over this last half hour she has looked more and more like she's suffering badly. Her teammates have had a really bad day at the office. More of that later on when we see them come through. But Lee here, negotiating her final few hundred meters, pumping hard. She is up to game, certainly, Mara, as she comes towards the finish line. It is a great silver for Lee Marquardt of China, the silver medalist in the World Championships at 50k 3 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, the summer of 2019, and silver again today.
Yeah, good on her. It's never good to be overtaken when you've been leading a race, and she really worked hard in that second 10k, so great to see her keep that gap for second place.
And here is the Pole, Katarzyna Zieblo, who has quietly worked away in isolation for most of this race this morning. Fabulous from her. That semi-smile, semi-grimace still on the features of the 25-year-old. Her best 2:50.54 from last year. She's not going to be a country mile outside that, actually. This bronze medal winning performance from her has been fantastic. The Polish champion at 20 kilometers 3 times holds the Polish record at 35k with that 2:50 clocking, while she finishes within about a minute of it. 2:50.54 of her best. She finished in less than a minute inside her lifetime best, and she still looks pretty fresh, doesn't she? She takes the bronze medal. Absolutely brilliant from Katarzyna Zieblo. And Polish walking communities can celebrate big time with the colour of that performance. And the bronze medal going to Laura Garcia Carro, the fourth place rather.
Oh, she looks a bit disappointed, doesn't she?
Yet so far.
When I spoke to her, she said she was really going to be fighting for the medals, and she was so close. But what a great performance, nevertheless, from Garcia Carro of Spain.
Big gaps too in this women's race through the final few laps. They were widening. The computer system has gone on the blink, but we can confirm for you that Morejon of Ecuador is the champion, that Lee Marquardt of China has the silver, and Katarzyna Zieblo of Poland the bronze in the women's 35 kilometers.
And here comes the next Ecuadorian athlete. Brilliant team performance, following in the footsteps of their compatriot Jefferson Perez, the Olympic champion from '96 in Atlanta at 20k, silver medalist 2008 in Beijing, and 3-time world champion.
That was Yaramillo, Carlos Yaramillo of Ecuador we saw go through just now. And is this one of the Chinese coming through towards the final turn? That's one of the Spanish athletes. And the Brazilian, that's Vicentina, Mayara Luiz Vicentina, the 31-year-old, who has never broken 3 hours for this distance, but she will do today, I think. And Pereira, Eliane Pereira, has a lifetime best at 3:05. She might well get ahead of that. Well, the men's race was won in spectacular style by Percy Carlstrom. Pereira is suffering here, but still walking well. The Brazilian 37-year-old, fifth in the Pan Am Games 50k back in 2019. She is coming towards her finish. One man who has had his finish, and he has had his day of days in the sun of Oman, is Percy Carlstrom, the world champion now at 35 kilometers, the inaugural world champion. Crossed the line, all are smiles, and we were able to catch up with him.
Congratulations. You could see what that meant to you at the end, but that was a fantastic performance.
Thank you. Yeah, that was, I don't know what to say. I certainly did not expect that today. I mean, I've been having a tough time. I was coming out of the last season with a hamstring injury, just building that back up. Doing the 35K in Ireland. I got COVID afterwards. Was sick and really bad for 3 weeks, and I've been just building really slowly since. And the last couple of weeks have been really tough. I hadn't been able to push in intensity. The last couple of weeks I've had one good session every week, and then maybe the turnaround came after the 20K in Pamplona. Even though I rolled my ankle really bad in that race, and I thought that this might be gone now. But I just managed to not injure myself, and then I had 2 really good training sessions and a really good training session coming here 10 days ago, and then just resting and recovering, and yeah, I felt just so amazing today. It was so good.
It was very tactical early on. Did that early pace suit you, because it was very bunched at the beginning?
Well, Percy Carlstrom there being interviewed after the race. Very calm, interesting to hear the trials and tribulations of his last few months. But let's take a look now at the best of the action from that men's 35 kilometers in Oman today. Well, the men and women getting away together at 7 a.m. local time, when the temperature was a good deal cooler than at the finish. And the most aggressive athlete through the first half of the race was Miroslav Uradnik of Slovakia, who kept himself ahead of a big pack of some 14, 16 athletes for the majority of the first 2/3 of the race. In fact, he wanted to be at the front again and again, but he could never open up a gap on that chasing pack. The Spaniards, Martin and Lopez, were ever present, as were the figures for Germany of Linke and Hilbert. The Chinese were there as well. Uradnik taking the field through 10k in 46:03. And then the second 10k was significantly quicker. And then in the second half of the race, it was Carlstrom of Sweden who began to move to the fore. The pack broke down. Liu of China was there through the third quarter of the race, battling for a medal. The 2 Spanish athletes, Martin and Lopez, were always there or thereabouts. And the lead changed several times, but it eventually came down to a marvellous head-to-head between Percy Carlstrom, the bronze medalist at the World Championships over 20 kilometers in 2019, and Alvaro Martin of Spain. Liu of China hoped he could make it onto the rostrum, but suffered in the latter stages. The Chinese monopoly of goals from the first day, all 3 individual goals and all 3 team goals on day 1 going to the Chinese. Well, that's run, a golden run, came to an end in this men's 35k. Carlstrom eventually getting the gap on the Spaniard Martin in the final 2 laps and breaking clear. Martin, the reigning European champion at 20 kilometers, a proven performer again and again, and easing away from him, Carlstrom, underlining perhaps the quality of his performance. Hearing the bell for the final time, the most glorious sound in temperatures that had risen through the race from 25, 26 degrees up to 30 degrees plus in the latter stages. And Carlstrom, well, he celebrated in traditional Swedish style. A woolly horned helmet for his final lap. What else, you might be thinking? But by this point, he had built up a gap of some 18 seconds and more over Martin in second place. And he knew this was an exhibition lap, a victory lap, in effect, while still in the competitive zone. He approached the finish line, celebrating in style. And this man who said after the race that he had injury problems, hamstring injury problems last year. He's recovered from 3 weeks of bad illness from COVID, able to enjoy his moment. And of course, Mara, you know full well that the adrenaline flows all the more after a wonderful performance. You'd think he could go round again.
Yeah, he didn't look that tired, did he? And of course he's a 20k specialist, so brilliant, stepping up brilliantly. And fabulous to see him embracing his mother there, Siv. She's a former champion here, 2-time champion, I should say. And Martin, the Spaniard, delighted with his second place. So Spain 2, 3, and just confirming the team results, but Spain winning the team results, we think.
Consolation there for Martin, who finished 4th at the Olympic Games in Sapporo last year, over 20 kilometers, a silver medal today in conditions more akin to Spain than they are to Sweden, that's for sure. And he was able to welcome home his compatriot Miguel Lopez, who took the bronze medal a little further back. Fabulous performances from the Spanish squad. And the 3 medalists then celebrating in style, while many others had many meters yet to walk. But Percy Carlstrom, the champion for Sweden. Well, let's just confirm that result for you. The top 12 there with Carlstrom on 2:36.14, winning by 40 seconds from Martin, the second Spaniard. Miguel Lopez at 2:37.27 for third place. Kawano in 4th for Japan. The best of the Chinese, Liu, in 5th place. And then Jungans for Germany, coming through strongly in the latter stages, takes 6th place, just ahead of Evan Dunphy of Canada, who had a pretty good day at the races. Schipponi, the best of the Italians, in 12th. Well, Zhen Hao of China in 3rd place. The Ecuadorians had a good day in the women's 35 kilometers. A pretty solid day for Pinzon there in 14th place for Ecuador. Linker of Germany in 17th. His teammate Seiler in 21st place, with Boyce of Ireland in 24th. Turambekar of India in 25th place. Great to see so many Indians walking well in Muscat. Antonelli of Italy down in 26th place. But every one of these athletes we know will have given 101%. Bustan Yapon of Ecuador in at 38th place, just inside the 3-hour mark. Well, let's take a look at that team result. And Spain finishing with the gold, pretty comfortably ahead of China, with Germany, their athletes working so hard, rewarded with those bronze medals, and quite a gap behind Germany there, back to the Italians in 4th.
Yeah, good for Germany to hang on for 3rd place. We saw some of them dropping through the field, having been right up there in the early stages, but no China on the podium for the first time. Sorry. silver for China. No title for China.
No gold for China. No,
Yep.
3 goals, 3 team goals on day one, and team silver for China in the men's 35k. And we can take a look now at the very best of that women's 35-kilometer championship, which was running simultaneously with the men. Well, it was a common start for the men and women at 7 a.m. in the shadow of the convention centre. And the early leader, well, it was a spectacular walking initially from the Indian Priyanka Goswami. She was dragged away from the pack of women, going with the men. And it may be that she was tucked in amongst the men, and the leading lights in the women's race didn't realise she was there. It promised a great deal, but it inevitably, eventually, was a tactic that came unstuck. But she will have learnt an enormous amount. Mariyama Uchi will Priyanka Goswami of India from this debut.
Yeah, she went off very aggressively, had nearly a 2-minute lead at one stage, I think. But yeah, as you said, lots of Indian athletes embracing race walking. I'm sure we'll see much more of them in future years. And Lee worked really hard to close that gap, going into the lead for quite a while before Morejon caught her.
It was a 2.5-minute gap that Goswami had built up at one point. Li Maokuo of China, the World Championship silver medalist from Doha 2019, over 50k, using all that strength to gradually reel in the Indian, who had her own bad patch and was caught mid-race by Lee, who looked so strong and confident for the third quarter of the race. We thought she was heading on for gold. One of the most understated but solid performances of the day was by Katarzyna Ziblok of Poland. Spent most of the race on her own. She is past Goswami of India as well, Priyanka Goswami, into the silver medal position, and carried on chasing Lee very hard. And at three-quarter distance, we thought that Lee was probably heading for the title and yet another Chinese gold. But one athlete had different plans, and this was she. Glenda Estefania Morejon of Ecuador holds the world under-20 20-kilometer best, and how she powered away in the latter stages. Fabulous cadence from the 21-year-old Ecuadorian, making her debut over 35 kilometers. Great walking too continued from Ziblok of Poland, as Morejon spent some time just observing Lee and then made her move. And Mara, it was fascinating that Lee put up stubborn resistance to try and hang on to the Ecuadorian for a few minutes, but eventually had to let go.
Yeah, good on Lee for hanging on to that silver medal position, but I feel there's a lot more to come from Morejon. The way she glanced across at Lee, she just looked totally in control of this race from start to finish. Really well paced, she didn't tire. I think we're going to see her on podiums a lot.
But once the gap had been established between Glenda Morejon and Lee Maokuo, it grew very quickly. The turnover rate, the cadence of Morejon was quite astonishing, and it carried her to a comfortable victory eventually. A winning time for Ecuador, a championship record, of course. It's the first major global championships over 35 kilometers for men or women. Her time 2:48.33, and she won by almost 2 minutes ahead of Li Maokuo. Suffered a lot, did the Chinese, in the last few kilometers. Raised her game as she approached the line, crossed it in supreme style to take that silver medal. If you can't be a winner, then be second. She gave 101%. Morejon totally dominant on the day. And Ziblok of Poland it was who was rewarded for a lonely effort through much of the race. with the bronze medal, finishing about a minute and a half behind Lee. But it was indeed gold for Morejon of Ecuador. Well, Glenda Morejon then confirmed as the champion, 2:48.33. Leo China make it onto the rostrum with that clocking of 2:50.26, and Zeblo finishing in fine form with Polish bronze, brilliant from 2:51.48. Garcia, Carro, so near yet so far in fourth place, the best of the Spanish on display. And what a team performance from the Ecuadorians. Perez in fifth, Yaramilo in sixth, ensuring that they take the team title. Nijalek in seventh place for Poland there, and great walking from Casey in eighth place there. Stephanie Casey, the 38-year-old American, only second in the US 35k championship, but eighth place in the world in Muscat. Juarez of Spain taking 13th place. Curiazzi, the best of the Italians, there in 14th place. Well, let's take a look at that team result in the women's competition. I don't think there was much doubt as to which team took gold over 35 kilometers for the women today. It was, of course, Ecuador, by some margin, confirmed as champions with 12 points, the total of the positions for their top three athletes. Spain getting a great silver medal there. So double gold for Glenda Morejon of Ecuador in the women's 35 kilometers individual and team gold. And later on this afternoon, the final event of these 2 days of great walking in Muscat, the men's 20 kilometers race walk. It's been a great morning. More to come later on. From all of us, bye-bye.